July 2002, over Germany, the middle of the night.
What is it?
A Russian plane is taking children on holiday to Spain, but the pilots can't believe what they see heading towards them.
Here on the left!
Increase climb.
Climb, you said!
It's among the most poignant air disasters of recent times. How could two planes collide over one of the most closely regulated areas in the world?
Bravo Tango Charlie.
Faulty technology or human error?
Oh!
June 2002, the city of Ufa in western Russia. Ufa is populated by both Christians and Muslims. This year, its most outstanding teenagers have been chosen to go on a 2-week vacation organized by UNESCO near Barcelona in Spain. They are among the most clever, athletic or artistic children of Ufa. Kirill Diktaryov is a 14-year-old prodigy. He's been painting since he was 4 years old and has already had 2 public exhibitions. He's halfway through his new work.
He was very good at painting. He felt colors. He received good reviews. The trip sounded very exciting. That's why we agreed that Kirill should go to Spain. He just graduated from grade 9. He needed some rest, and it was a good opportunity for a summer holiday.
Alina Hananova is a 12-year-old who's won several gymnastics competitions.
We were very glad for her because, indeed, very smart and very talented children were flying there. All extraordinary children in terms of their personalities. She studied very well, and she got only excellent marks. I remember that she was pleased to go on the trip. She loved getting ready for it. She was so excited. We purchased some clothes and some vacation stuff. As she was born, I informed my husband, and he cried because he was happy to have a daughter.
The 46 children from Ufa, accompanied by a few teachers, leave on a train to Moscow. There, they're due to catch their flight to Barcelona. But in Moscow, things start to go wrong. The tourist agency accidentally takes the children to the wrong airport, so they miss their plane. They're terribly disappointed. While the agency tries to sort out the mess, the children go sightseeing in the Russian capital. It takes 2 days to charter another jet, but finally they're on their way to Barcelona. On July the 1st, 2002, the children from Ufa board their plane at a Moscow airport. The Kaloyevs are not part of the school group. They're going on a holiday to meet their father, who's an architect, and is finishing a project near Barcelona. No fewer than 5 Russians are flying this plane. The captain is Alexander Gross, who's been a pilot for over 30 years.
Alexander had a good theoretical knowledge. He was very smart.
Today, the first officer is Oleg Grigoriev. But actually, Grigoriev is the airline's chief pilot. On this trip, he'll be evaluating Captain Gross's flying.
If you did something wrong, some captains would criticize you very rudely. Others would be very formal and polite. But Oleg Grigoriev would express his disapproval in a gesture, like that, meaning, why on earth did you do that?
Captain Gross is in command, but Captain Grigoriev is his supervisor. If it comes to the crunch, who will really be in charge? Seated in the left rear is Murat Itkuyilov, normally the first officer, but who's not officially on duty because Grigoriev is in his seat. Nevertheless, since he'll soon be promoted to captain, his opinions are considered.
Мурат был профессионален как пилот, любил летать.
Murat was a very professional pilot. He loved to fly. Murat was interested in the new stuff in aviation and always kept up to date on the most progressive things brought in.
Also on the flight deck are an experienced navigator and a flight engineer. Just before 11 that evening, Bashkirian Airlines Flight 2937 leaves Moscow. The plane is a Tupolev 154. Like most modern aircraft, it carries collision avoidance equipment called TCAS, or Traffic Collision Avoidance System.
Descend, descend, descend.
TCAS works because all commercial aircraft carry a transponder, which sends a constant stream of radio signals identifying them and saying where they are. TCAS listens in and calculates whether any of the planes is on a collision course. If they are, it will tell the pilot what action to take to avoid collision.
Descend, descend.
If air traffic control should ever let them down, TCAS will be their last line of defense.
Clear of conflict.
Hundreds of miles away in Bergamo, Italy, a Boeing 757 is getting underway. It's flying for DHL, the international freight company, and is heading for their European base at Brussels in Belgium. The Russian Tupolev will cross its path over southern Germany. The Boeing has only 2 people aboard, Captain Paul Phillips, who's British, and First Officer Brant Campioni, who's Canadian, and due to fly the next leg of the journey. The DHL takes off at 6 minutes past 11, on what will be its last journey. Ten to 8 at the Skyguide Area Control Center in Zurich, Switzerland. The busy day shift has ended and the night shift is reporting for work. Peter Nielsen is an experienced controller. He's been doing this job for 8 years. The center regulates air traffic in southern Germany as well as northern Switzerland. Tonight, there are only 2 controllers on duty. But the traffic in their sector is light, and Nielsen's colleague decides to take a lengthy break, a common practice at Skyguide. Peter Nielsen is now responsible for all air traffic on 2 radar screens, which sit several feet apart. At 10 past 11, 2 technicians arrive. They inform Peter that Skyguide management has authorized them to carry out maintenance work on the main radar. While they do so, the screens will work much more slowly, and will give no visual 2-minute warning if planes are getting too close to each other.
Thai Inter 933, route Tratzig and Allgäu. Bavarian 350, descend flight level 270.
The engineers now tell Peter Nielsen they have to shut down the telephone system as well. They switch over to the standby phones. No one realizes it yet, but the seeds of disaster have been sown. The Russian plane, filled with schoolchildren, is now over central Germany and flying towards Switzerland. Captain Grigoriev gets final clearance from the last German control center before they cross south into Switzerland.
128.05, Bravo Tango Charlie, 2937. Goodbye.
The German controller hands over the Russian plane to Skyguide, where Peter Nielsen is at the helm. Meanwhile, the DHL plane is climbing north over the Alps and is now entering Swiss airspace.
Zurich, radar, good evening. Dilmun 611, I'm climbing flight level 260, direct Obasi.
Captain Paul Phillips of the DHL requests clearance to climb to a higher altitude. The thinner air there will mean less air resistance and save fuel.
Roger, climb flight level 320. Direct Tango Golf Oscar and requesting
360, thanks. It's available.
Tillman 611, climb flight level 360.
The DHL reaches flight level 360, or 36,000 feet, the same altitude as the Russian plane. And they're on a collision course. But they're many miles apart. So far, no danger. Now the assistant gives Peter Nielsen a new flight strip. An Airbus Aero Lloyd Flight 1135 is flying to the airport of Friedrichshafen nearby. It's going to increase Peter's workload dramatically over the next 5 minutes and have him switching from one screen to another. Peter tries to dial the airport control tower at Friedrichshafen to discuss handing over the Aero Lloyd flight to them. But the line is dead. He tries a second time. The phones aren't working. The Aero Lloyd pilot is trying to make contact with Peter. He has to leave the Russian pilots unattended.
Zurich, good evening. Bravo Tango Charlie.
But the Russian pilot is also calling him on the other screen.
Aeroloid 1135, roger. Call you back. Station calling.
Say again, please.
Zurich, good evening. Bravo Tango Charlie, 2937.
Level 360.
Bravo Tango Charlie 2937, squad 7520.
The Aero Lloyd is calling again.
Yeah, expect so. Call you back shortly.
Now another plane needs him. A Thai Airways flight heading north.
Thai Inter 933. Contact now on Munich 132.140. Goodbye.
140, Thai.
Air traffic controllers are used to handling tricky situations. But tonight, Peter's equipment isn't working properly, and he's controlling 2 screens at the same time. Normally, his radar would warn of any impending collision. What he doesn't know is that tonight, it's out of action.
Correct. What is your present heading?
Present heading is 265.
Roger. Right turn, heading 280, vector ILS 24.
Right heading 280 to expect ILS 24, Aero Lloyd 1.
Peter wants to get this Aero Lloyd flight off his hands. He tries dialing the public number for the Friedrichshafen control tower for the 3rd time.
Bitte überprüfen Sie die Rufnummer. Die gewünschte Verbindung ist...
Meanwhile, the Russian airliner and the DHL plane are still heading towards each other at a closing speed of over 800 miles per hour. Neither crew is aware that they're only 2.5 minutes apart. The DHL plane is now approaching the Swiss border with Germany. The Russian Tupolev is heading for exactly the same spot and at the same altitude. Finally, someone at another air traffic control center in Germany spots the danger.
Conflict.
He grabs the phone to warn Nielsen, but can't get through. International air traffic rules prevent him from talking to the pilots directly.
Look at that.
Now, for the first time, the Russian pilots can see the DHL plane on the screen of their TCAS anti-collision computer. But Peter Nielsen is still focused on getting the Aeroloid flight safely down.
Aeroloid 1135.
Aeroloid 1135, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I lost my connection to Friedrichshafen Airport. Could you please call them on your second set, 124.35. Tell them you're coming in ILS 24 with 20 miles now?
Okay, will do.
Thank you.
Okay, taking over.
On the DHL cargo plane, the crew is relaxed. They don't know they're on a collision course. Their TCAS hasn't sounded a warning yet.
Stuff I can get you?
The first officer goes to the washroom. On the Russian plane, the pilots are getting concerned. The other plane is getting closer and closer, but they're not exactly sure whether he's on the same altitude as them.
He's going below us.
Why below?
500. No, 100 meters.
Traffic.
Now fucking traffic.
Why?
Traffic.
TCAS, the collision avoidance computer, is warning the Russian pilots that the other plane is getting too close for comfort. At the same moment, the TCAS in the DHL cockpit detects the Russian plane.
Descend.
Peter Nielsen finally realizes what's happening.
Bravo Tango Charlie 2937. Descend flight level 350. Expedite. I have crossing traffic.
Descend.
Captain Gross disengages the autopilot and starts to descend.
Climb.
TCAS is telling them to climb. The controller is telling them to descend.
It says climb.
He is guiding us down.
Bravo
Descend?
Tango Charlie 2937. Descend level 350. Expedite descent.
Expedite descent level 350.
Bravo Tango Charlie 2937.
Peter Nielsen thinks he's averted a collision by telling the Russian plane to descend. But what he doesn't know is that the DHL pilots have received a TCAS instruction telling them to descend.
Increase! Dilmoon 600, TCAS descent!
They're trying to tell Nielsen that they have a TCAS instruction to descend, but Peter can't hear them. If both planes obeyed TCAS, there'd be no problem. But the Russians, instead of climbing, have followed the controller's orders. Now both planes are diving towards each other.
He's going below us.
Fuck, where is it?
Here on the left!
Increase climb.
Climb, it says!
Climb!
Descend! Fuck, descend hard!
The tail of the DHL clips the belly of the Tupolev, tearing it apart. The pilots soon lose consciousness. The DHL struggles on for another 2 minutes. It will crash 4 miles away.
Can we go over to Friedrichshafen?
Affirm. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Peter is unaware of what just happened.
Bravo Tango Charlie 2937. Bravo Tango Charlie 2937. Bravo Tango Charlie.
This is the nightmare that every controller hopes will not happen to him. Two of his aircraft colliding, killing scores of people.
Oh!
Peter Nielsen leaves the control room for the last time, but his story is far from over. The wreckage of the two planes has fallen just outside the small city of Überlingen on the German-Swiss border. Wreckage is scattered over 130 square miles. It's the worst mid-air collision in German post-war history. Debris comes raining down around a school for handicapped children run by Bruno and Stella Wegmüller.
The sky was orange, red, flaming, and we saw these pieces falling down and detonations again and again, and we realized it couldn't have been a normal thunderstorm. It was something we had never heard and seen before.
It was incredible because there are many, many houses here, and there was nothing on this place. But around our school, we find bodies, children.
We very soon also realized that we couldn't do anything, really. We couldn't save anyone, we couldn't help anyone. Today, actually, some people still suffer and see the pictures and have to learn to deal with these pictures. And for other people, it is like a bad dream.
The problem was that the bodies and debris were dispersed over a very, very wide area, approximately 40 square kilometers. A corridor 20 kilometers long and 2 kilometers wide.
It was the largest police operation in the province of Baden-Württemberg, lasting a week and involving over 6,000 people searching for the bodies.
The people were all very sad. They were all in a state of extreme shock, and naturally the rescue team could feel that and empathized with their suffering.
The policeman is standing where the DHL crashed.
Here you see no more trees. The trees have completely burned down. We assume that the turbines of the Boeing separated first, approximately 700 to 800 meters high before this plane crashed. One landed 300 meters that way, and the other turbine was another 500 meters that way.
In this garden lay many of the bodies of the children of Ufa.
In this part died 28 children. In this field, there was a child. More over here, in this field, there was a
When they showed a close-up of an airplane, I saw an emblem of our Bashkir Airlines on the rear of the aircraft. I was in the kitchen. Everybody was still asleep. I nearly fainted. I leaned to the table. I didn't know what to do.
The Hananov family lost their only daughter. Irina Degtarieva lost her only child.
We hoped for some kind of a miracle, that he missed the plane. In a word, we didn't want to believe in this news. It was like thunder in a clear sky, and God forbid anyone gets news like this.
Vitaly Khaloyev, the Russian architect, was awaiting his family in Barcelona. He's one of the first to arrive in Überlingen. Although the relatives are not encouraged to participate in the search, Vitaly cannot help himself. Vitaly finds a broken pearl necklace. He recognizes it as his 4-year-old daughter's.
My angel.
Amazingly, amidst all the carnage, Vitaly finds his daughter's body intact.
She did not suffer at all.
The mutilated bodies of his wife and son won't be found until later. Over 6 days of searching, the rescue workers gather bodies and body parts scattered all over the southern German countryside.
By Thursday of that week, 2 days later, the relatives started arriving. They could not all see the bodies we'd found because most of the bodies were badly charred or mutilated. We didn't permit the relatives to view the bodies in that condition.
In Ufa, in western Russia, both Christian and Muslim communities are devastated by the loss of their children. In the cemetery, where 53 of the people in the Tupolev are buried, there are 2 double rows of gravestones, with the Christian Orthodox on one side and the Muslims on the other. It's eerily reminiscent of the seating arrangement on the plane. The monument evokes a flight of paper planes frozen in flight. This is Kirill's grave, the young talented artist. And this is Alina's, the 12-year-old gymnast. Vitaly Khaloyev, who lost his entire family, has designed and built a huge monument in their memory. Day and night, he lingers at the cemetery, inconsolable. At Skyguide in Zurich, after the collision, work has all but come to a standstill.
People were in a state of shock. They were shocked, they were helpless, there was a lot of sadness, people crying. And we were criticized for being too technocratic after the accident. I have to accept that. One of the biggest tasks was to maintain operations, because there were planes coming in, going out after this tragedy, and that was a very, very difficult situation for everybody.
For the next 3 weeks at the Zurich Air Traffic Control Center, capacity is reduced for lack of available controllers. Peter Nielsen never again worked on an air traffic workstation.
If you go through something like that, you're not able to come back. It's too deep in, and it's too big.
From an emotional point of view, of course, it was shattering. It was, for me, really, really terrible. Terrible in the sense that it happened to one of my colleagues, it happened to our profession, but it also happened to families who lost their children.
The hunt begins for a scapegoat. If two planes collide in empty skies, someone must be to blame. At first, some suspect the Russians.
The pilot of the Russian plane is said to have ignored repeated instructions from air traffic controllers.
And while the repeatedly, they contacted the Russian pilot and asked him to change altitude because he was flying at a level where he should not have been. Now, the Russian pilot never responded to those warnings from air traffic control.
The Russian pilots, particularly in Soviet times and also now, but to a lesser extent, were extremely well trained. I have no concerns about the training of pilots. They've been trained for almost every operational possibility that could happen.
Why did the TCAS device meant to avoid collisions, in this case maybe help cause one?
And why didn't the Russian plane descend when first ordered? A language problem? Controller commands are always in English.
I knew everybody from that crew. Everybody knew English enough to speak with controller.
So who is to blame? The media spotlight now falls on controller Peter Nielsen. He was the man who'd guided the two planes towards each other. They were under his control. He must have caused them to collide.
I was as shocked as I could have been with any other name or any other colleague. I was just very sorry for him. The media coverage about the incident very often makes you angry because these statements are taken out of context. You really get the impression they just want to fill the newspaper, they write whatever they get. They go after colleagues, they give them a call at home, they follow you wherever you are.
You don't deserve to be the boogeyman for everybody. And that's something which really is still very difficult to accept, that suddenly we are some sort having to take the blame because the others are dead or the others are hiding behind politics, rules and things like this.
We started to leave this building by the underground exit, which leads through another building, just not to see anybody. They were asking people on the street in Kloten, people who were not involved at all, just to broadcast something in the evening. And that makes you angry, and you cannot resist it.
And what more do we know about this Swiss controller at the center of the investigation?
He was chased by the media. He was accused of being a murderer.
He's the man, obviously, everyone wants to talk to, but at the moment, the Swiss say he's in no position to talk. And we heard today that the Swiss authorities have opened an investigation to see whether there's enough evidence for charges of manslaughter.
The accusation was manslaughter by negligence in 71 cases. And the speciality is that in this case, the investigating judge has been working on a investigation on his own, independently from what the Aviation Investigation Board of Germany did.
Meanwhile, that investigation is underway, headed by Germany's air crash detectives, the BFU. By the fifth day, they've read all the black boxes.
So this is a typical voice recorder, which was built into the Tupolev 154. It shows two reels. The recording time of this recorder is 30 minutes. And this is rather solid, but the original voice recorder of the Tupolev was heavily damaged. So we had to remove the tape and replay it on such a specialized tape recorder.
This is the hangar where wreckage of the planes was examined.
This one here is the lower surface of the right wing of the Tupolev, and that remaining stub here went below the Tupolev and caused these scratches. That top part of the vertical tail remained at the accident site on the main wreckage of the Boeing.
But could this accident have been avoided? TCAS normally has a safeguard mechanism called a reversal. If an alert is issued and one aircraft crew ignores an instruction, TCAS orders a reversal. If the TCAS on aircraft A senses that aircraft B is still on a collision course, it will tell it to go in another direction. But it didn't. Why?
One of the major requirements for that is that both planes have to be at least 100 feet apart in altitude. But this requirement was not met at the time. That's why no reversal was given.
When the DHL's TCAS saw that the Tupolev wasn't climbing, it could only tell its pilots to descend even faster.
Increase descent.
If the reversal had been possible, the children of Ufa might have lived. July 2003. Many parents returned to Ubelingen in Germany for the first anniversary. The Germans built a memorial on the site of the tragedy. It's made up of a series of giant silver pearls on a broken necklace. The head of Skyguide is among the crowd.
Can you tell us, what are the mistakes you made?
I don't think this is the time to talk about it. I'm sure you'll understand.
Have you apologized?
Okay. Thank you.
Among the parents is Vitaly Kaloyev. He asks the head of Skyguide which controller was responsible for the accident, but receives no answer.
Yes, in fact, the man asked if it is possible to meet the controller, to meet Peter, and the answer was it is not possible.
The request passes almost unnoticed, but Vitaly Kaloyev is not satisfied.
Descend. Crossing.
Meanwhile, as the investigators work, they discover a fog of confusion surrounding TCAS. When it was introduced 20 years previously, there'd been a fatal omission.
Descend flight level 350. Expedite. I have.
No one said what should happen if there was a conflict between what TCAS was saying and what the controller was saying.
It says climb.
There's no hard and fast rule to guide the pilots.
He is guiding us down.
Increase descent.
Whilst pilots in the West have always been taught to obey TCAS,
600, TCAS descent.
in the rest of the world, it's anyone's guess.
We're not accustomed to not trusting controllers. In civil aviation, there were lots of situations when pilots didn't follow instructions of the controller, and that led to plane crashes or other accidents.
The mentality of Russians is still very much in the lines of the old Soviet ways, and they're much more inclined to follow instructions than to do what they think may be appropriate. They always reckon that the other guy knows better.
The potential for a terrible accident was there, and a year and a half before the Ubelingen tragedy, it nearly happened. Over Japan, 2 jumbo jets with 677 people aboard came so close that they filled each other's windscreens. The violent avoidance maneuver caused 100 people to be injured, some of them seriously. This was seconds away from being the worst plane crash in aviation history. Once again, a pilot had listened to the controller instead of his TCAS.
Descend.
It should have served as a warning to everyone. Yet from ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization, there was only silence. ICAO is responsible for drawing up the rules of commercial aviation. German investigators say that their vagueness about how to use TCAS was one of the reasons for the Ubelingen disaster.
I think this is the first time that I remember any major accident investigation, the one done by the BFU, fingering any of the aviation authorities in any serious way. And this is a serious way. So I think this is quite unique.
If ICAO had carried out a detailed investigation of the incident in Japan and made recommendations that led to changes in procedures, this probably would not have happened.
ICAO did not feel it necessary to get involved in this, and they left it entirely up to the Japanese authorities. Had it been a collision, maybe they would have got involved.
After this near miss, the Japanese government immediately asked for their guidance. But unfortunately, ICAO only acted on the request 18 months later, after the Überlingen disaster.
Perhaps the ICAO procedures and standards, but in particular operating procedures for airborne collision avoidance, were somewhat ambiguous or open to interpretation.
The Japanese incident was not the only warning ICAO received. In the 2 years leading up to the Überlingen collision, 4 other near misses happened in Europe alone because one set of pilots obeyed air traffic control instead of their TCAS.
If I have to summarize the advice that we gave the world, if a warning comes from ACAS, pilots should immediately follow it at all times. With the benefit of hindsight, you always ask yourself, could we have done more? And an accident is a wake-up call for everybody.
All of these regrets are of little comfort now to the grieving parents of Ufa.
Everything that was good is in the past and was connected with my child. All the hopes, dreams were connected with him, with his future. And now, nothing left. At least I've got nothing left. So the right way to put it is, my life didn't change. It stopped. Our pain doesn't go away, you know? It's getting stronger every year. It's getting harder to live. At first, we had a hope that she'd come back, that time would pass and things would fall into right places. And now the hope is gone. And the worst thing is that the kids were flying happy. Healthy kids were going on a vacation. And some grown-up people made a mistake, made a fatal mistake. And the kids were gone.
Она была очень такая любимая.
She was loved. She was very kind, gentle. She was the beloved daughter. Beloved daughter.
This is Kirill's room. Everything in this room is like it was when he was alive. Nothing's changed. After he was killed, there were also 2 exhibitions. One exhibition took place here, in Ufa, while the other one was in Germany, in Überlingen. And that's Kirill's last painting. He was really glad. He planned that he'd finish it when he'd get back.
Vitaly Khaloyev, the Russian architect, has lost his entire family, everything. He himself has gone to pieces. He's become obsessed with finding out who is responsible for the collision. Khaloyev decides to travel to Zurich to play out the last tragic chapter in the Überlingen story. On February the 24th, 2004, a stranger calls at the house of the controller, Peter Nielsen.
Yeah. Get out of my face. Just go away.
It was just the saddest thing you can imagine. I knew his family. I knew how much he loved his kids and his wife, and
The presumed perpetrator is apparently 48 years old and of Eastern origin. He is likely the father of one of the families that was killed at the crash. He likely lost his wife and both their children.
They found Vitaly Khaloyev nearby in a hotel. Suspected but not yet charged with the murder, he's presently in a psychiatric clinic while they decide whether he's fit to stand trial.
Did he have the capacity to discern? Was it an impulse, or did he have the capacity to commit a crime?
Certain traces and police evidence were found which seemed to indicate that he could be the murderer.
We are working on this theory after the accused himself conceded that he could be the murderer.
We didn't want him to be killed. We didn't want to have more victims related to that catastrophe because of our children.
The killing of the flight controller was a very, very sad event. And the saddest thing of all was that he was not actually responsible for the accident. The system responsible for the accident was the poor Skyguide management and quality control of their system.
The investigators had worked out exactly what went wrong that night at Skyguide and how an unfortunate series of events had made disaster almost inevitable. First, Peter's colleague goes for a break, leaving him alone to watch two radar screens several feet apart.
It was a standard practice at the ATC company that at night, one air traffic controller was responsible for controlling the entire airspace of ATC Zurich.
Then, following management instructions, the maintenance men start to switch things off. Peter's radar screen is working more slowly and will not warn him if two planes are about to collide. He doesn't know that.
During the maintenance work, the radar system had to be run in fallback mode. In fallback mode, the controller has no STCA available.
STCA is short-term collision alert, a warning on the radar screen that planes are in imminent danger of collision.
He did not know that the STCA system would not be available.
Then by chance, an unexpected aircraft, the Aeroloid tourist plane, arrives at the critical moment and needs a lot of attention. It completely distracts Peter. He tries to get outside help, but the main phone system has been accidentally disconnected by the maintenance crew, and the backup phone isn't working. The controller has been robbed of all the technical support he needs.
The phone link with Friedrichshafen was down. At this time, there were various radio transmissions, and the controller had to answer them on the different frequencies.
Finally, when both planes are descending, the DHL pilots cannot tell him what's happening because the radio frequency is busy.
600, TCAS, descent!
The earliest they could do that was 23 seconds later, because until then, the frequency was blocked by the ATC Zurich transmission to the Tupolev crew.
May 2004. It had taken the German BFU investigators 22 months to publish their final report. They found that the disaster had two major causes. Firstly, Peter Nielsen was too late in noticing the danger of a collision. Secondly, the Russian crew was wrong to obey him when he told them to descend, rather than their own TCAS equipment telling them to climb. But other pilots understand their dilemma.
The TCAS commands are spoken in such a dispassionate voice. Descend, increase descent, such a matter-of-fact type of voice. And then there's the voice of the air traffic controller's urgent command. Descend immediately, leave this altitude immediately, go to another altitude at once. So, whichever voice sounded more urgent was the one the crew obeyed.
Finally, the report severely criticized Skyguide for leaving a lone controller on duty that night.
We have learned our lesson, and we don't have single-manned operations or only one controller in front of a monitor. anymore.
This might happen again. Another badly organized air control service or a crew might make a mistake.
You're guilty or not guilty. That's not the meaning of a final report. The meaning of a final report is facts. What has happened? Why did it happen? What are the lessons to be learned? Safety requirements.
Why didn't they provide safety during that flight, when my child was on board? They must take the responsibility for not providing security for that flight.
Mistakes were made by us also, and we regret them deeply. We acknowledge our responsibility as set out in the BFU report, and we ask the families of the victims for forgiveness.
At Skyguide in Zurich, a rose now sits in a vase in memory of Peter Nielsen and the tragedy of Überlingen.
Helios 522, do you read?
High above Athens, fighter jets track a 737 as it circles the city.
522, do you read? Over.
There's no answer from the passenger plane, but there is someone at the controls. More than 100 people are on board.
Everybody's mind was going to a hijack or terrorist.
There is one person moving in the cockpit. Repeat, there is one
What
person.
happened to the crew and passengers?
522, do you read? Over.
And who is flying the plane?
Helios 522, do you read? Over.
Mayday, Mayday.
Early morning, August the 14th, 2005. The cabin crew of Helios Airways Flight 522 are preparing for their trip from the island of Cyprus to Athens, Greece.
Sure is a beautiful day. Maybe I shouldn't have come in.
Andreas Prodromou is 25. He isn't supposed to be working today, but he's taken the flight to spend some time with his girlfriend, who also works for Helios.
It's the sort of day I'd like to be out flying.
You will, Andreas.
Prodromou is a flight attendant now, but he has bigger plans. One day, he wants to fly for Helios.
Το όνειρο του ήταν να γίνει επαγγελματίας πιλότος.
His dream was to become a professional
Για
pilot.
πολλούς λόγους.
Personally,
ήθελα να
I
είναι
wanted
στη
him to stay
δουλειά
in the family
μας, να
business.
μείνει μαζί μου, αλλά
We often talked about
παρόλο
this.
που έκαμε κάποιο διάστημα κοντά μου,
We've got company.
Stay warm at the back.
I will.
In the cockpit, the flight crew is occupied with the daily routine of preparing their jet for takeoff.
Right today.
Captain Hans Merten is an East German, a contract pilot hired by Helios for the busy holiday season.
Are you almost through? Pardon? You almost done.
Nearly. Well, the overheat lights.
His co-pilot is from Cyprus. Pambos Charalambous has been working exclusively for Helios for the last 5 years. Before beginning any flight, crews are required to perform dozens of checks on various pieces of onboard equipment.
Oxygen mask stowed.
It's a routine but necessary procedure.
Doors closed. Sorry, could you store trays? Pull your seat back.
Helios is a charter airline with low-cost fares to Greece. It's a summer weekend and the plane is filled with families. In all, there are 115 passengers on the morning flight.
If you need any more help, let me know. We're just about to take off.
They are low fare, no frills. They don't even serve you refreshments during small sorts of flights. But they offer another possibility for the budget-minded traveler.
Paros Dimitriou and Maria Rikou are traveling to the Greek island of Patros. They've just got engaged.
They booked this holiday a month or more than a month ago. It was like a honeymoon for them.
Flight attendants, please take your seats. Prepare to take off.
Just a few minutes after 9 in the morning, Helios Airways Flight 522 lifts off into the bright sunshine.
Nicosia Area Control, this is Helios 522. Request cruising at 340.
Helios 522, you are cleared to climb to 340. Have a good day.
Set 340. 340.
Minutes into the flight, the plane is still climbing towards its cruising altitude. Suddenly, an alarm blares in the cockpit.
What is it?
Takeoff config warning?
The flight crew is confused. The takeoff configuration alarm normally only sounds on the ground. It tells pilots their jet isn't ready for takeoff. The crew doesn't know why it's sounding now. Uncertain what the problem is, the captain radios the Helios Operations Center at Larnaca Airport back in Cyprus.
Operations, this is Flight 522, over.
Flight 522, what can I do for you?
We have a takeoff config warning on.
Pardon?
Our takeoff config warning is on.
I'm sure it's nothing. I'll let you know when we level off.
With the first alarm still beeping in the cockpit, things become even more confusing. Their master caution alarm goes off. It could indicate that some systems on board are overheating.
We now have a master caution.
I'll get you an engineer. 522, just a minute. I find him very hard to understand. His accent is quite thick.
Flight 522, what can I do for you?
The ventilation cooling fan lights are off.
Sorry, can you repeat?
While the pilots and ground engineers try to troubleshoot the two alarms, most passengers have no idea there's a problem until...
Everyone, stay calm. Please remain seated.
Everyone, please put the oxygen masks on completely over your mouth and nose.
The protocol was immediately to secure yourself, grab an oxygen mask, stay in your seat. If you can help passengers without getting up, you could help them, and you should help them, but you would not risk the safety of any cabin crew member to go and help a passenger which is 5 or 6 rows further up.
Their procedure would be to grab their mask, don it, and wait for the aircraft to level off or commence with the descent.
No one in the cabin knows what the problem is. They're waiting for information from the cockpit. The pilots are unaware that the oxygen masks in the cabin have dropped, and they still don't know why their takeoff configuration warning is on, or why their systems are overheating.
Both of my equipment cooling lights are off.
This is normal. Can you please confirm your problem?
But the engineer on the ground is struggling to get a clear picture of what's happening in the air.
They are not switched off.
Can you confirm that the pressurization panel is set to auto?
Where are my equipment cooling circuit breakers?
Behind the captain's seat. Can you see them?
What's going on? There's something wrong with the electrics on 522.
I had something to pick up from operations, so I was there. I figured, oh, not again, one of our problems. So I left. Oh, good luck.
The problem doesn't seem serious, but as the plane continues to climb, passengers still haven't received any information from the cockpit.
Helios 522, can you see the circuit breakers?
And now the engineer on the ground loses contact with the aircraft.
Helios 522, can you hear me?
It's less than 30 minutes after takeoff, and Flight 522 is still on course. The plane is high above the Mediterranean Sea and headed straight towards Athens. August the 14th, 2005. A Helios Airways 737 with 121 people on board is circling in the sky near Athens.
Helios 522, can you hear me?
Shortly after leaving the island
Over.
of Cyprus, 2 different alarms had been triggered on the plane. The flight crew was trying to solve the problem with the help of ground engineers. But now radio contact with the plane has been lost. Air traffic control can't get any response from the captain or co-pilot. The flight to Greece normally takes an hour and a half. But the passenger jet has been in the air for over 2 hours, circling in a holding pattern.
We heard that there was an airplane which was flying into the Greek territory and had no communication. Everybody's mind was going to a hijack or to terrorists.
More than 3 million people live in Athens. A plane slamming into the city could cause an incredible loss of life.
This is a runaway aircraft. It's a possible hijacking or it's a possible terrorist act, so let's involve the military.
The Greek Air Force scrambles 2 of its most sophisticated fighter jets to investigate the Helios plane.
Helios 522, do you read? Over.
But the pilots aren't getting any response. One of the jets flies closer to the cockpit. Someone is in the co-pilot's seat, slumped over the controls. But there's no sign of the captain at all. The fighter pilot radios air traffic control in Athens.
Athens ACC, there is one figure in the cockpit of Helios 522. He appears non-responsive. Athens ACC, checking the cabin.
He can see passengers in their seats, but none of them reacts to the presence of the jet. Then the pilot sees someone moving in the cockpit.
Athens Control, there is one person moving in the cockpit of Helios 522. Repeat, there is one person inside the cockpit.
Helios 522, do you read? Over.
Helios 522, over. Flight HCY 522, this is Athene radar control. How do
The
you hear?
F-16s continue shadowing the jet, but there's no response at all from the cockpit.
One of them was actually in a shooting position behind the 737. The other one was nearby the cockpit and he was trying to communicate visually with the person in the cockpit.
Suddenly, the 737 turns left and begins to quickly descend.
Athens ACC, Helios 522 turning sharply. Following down.
From more than 10,000 meters, the plane drops towards the ground.
There is no structural failure, there is no fire, there is no problem, obvious problem from the external view with the plane.
Helios 522, over. Do you read?
Helios 522,
Do you over.
Then, 2,100 meters above the ground, the person in the captain's seat acknowledges the fighter jet for the very first time. But no words are exchanged. Neither the fighter pilot nor local air traffic control can make radio contact with the jet. Just after 12 o'clock, almost 3 hours after it took off from the island of Cyprus, Helios Flight 522 slams into the ground.
Saturday ACC, Helios 522 is down. Repeat, Helios 522 is down on Gramatico Hill. Over.
Fire and rescue workers rush to the crash site. There are no survivors. Flight attendant Lazaros Temetsian is stunned by what he hears at the company's operations center.
It was the most chaotic scene I've ever seen. When I went back, our operations controller said that he lost the aircraft, and his eyes, he was starting to cry.
Helios is a small company with just 3 jets. Members of the cabin crew have been working together for years. For Paul Simeonides, news of the crash is particularly terrifying. He's a flight attendant for the airline, and so is his fiancée.
I think that must have been the worst 30 minutes of my life following that first image, because Victoria was flying that morning to Glasgow. I had everyone and his brother, every person we knew was calling me up to find out if I'm alive, if Victoria's alive, what happened, why it happened.
At first we said it takes 1 hour and a half to go to Greece, so probably it's not that plane. And it took about 2 or 3 hours later to know that Paris and Maria was on the plane that crashed.
Andreas Prodromu's father didn't know his son had been called to fill in on Flight 522.
I was told that Helios aircraft was lost by radar, and air controllers couldn't contact. I got worried. I called Andreas' phone. He always had it on. And unfortunately, he wouldn't answer. After that phone call, I felt as if the ground was pulled out from under my feet.
It's the worst air crash in the history of Greece. Most of the 121 victims are from Cyprus. The small island nation declares 3 days of mourning following the crash. It's an eerie disaster. For over an hour, air traffic controllers watched the passenger jet fly in radio silence closer and closer to Athens, with no idea what was happening inside the jet. Now, piece by piece, investigators are trying to find out.
So we climbed over the hill, and there we were, facing this situation, which was beyond any description. I saw a great area in front of me, which was burning. It was black. Burning, people spread, pieces of the airplane.
It is a truly nightmarish sight. I hope that I never experience it again. It was terrible, just terrible.
Investigators immediately start looking for the cause of the crash. In the early days, their efforts take a frustrating turn. They recover the box containing the cockpit voice recorder, but the recorder itself has been thrown clear.
It was difficult for us because we first found the case of the CVR. very badly damaged, and we could not find the machine itself.
Investigators need to know what happened to the pilots. Without the cockpit voice recorder, they have little to go on.
So keep looking. Let's hope we can find it.
Bodies recovered from the wreckage are brought to the offices of Athens' chief coroner. Autopsies add more mystery to the case. Everyone on board the plane was alive at the time of the crash.
Υπήρχαν σενάρια
There were scenarios at the time that they had all died in
ότι
midair.
ήταν όλοι νεκροί στον αέρα. Η αιτία θανάτου είναι σαφής που την επανέλαβα πιο πάνω. Δεν υπάρχει καμία απολύτως αμφιβολία. Οι άνθρωποι σκοτώθηκαν.
But if the passengers were alive the entire flight, why didn't the pilot of the fighter jet see any activity inside the cabin? And who was at the controls as the jet circled over Athens? When investigators find tissue samples in the remains of the cockpit, they make a stunning discovery. The person at the controls of the plane when it crashed was flight attendant Andreas Prodromou, a last-minute addition to the cabin crew. But why was he in the cockpit? Was he trying to save the plane? Or did he deliberately fly it into the ground? Several days after finding the outer case of the cockpit voice recorder, investigators find the recording itself. When Chief Investigator Tsoulakis listens to the final moments of the flight, it answers a vital question.
Mayday. Mayday.
This was no terrorist act.
Flight 522.
Prodromou was calling for help.
Mayday.
Tsoulakis hears 5 separate Maydays on the tape, even though none of them were heard by the air traffic controllers.
Από την πρώτη στιγμή που άκουσα ότι κάποιον πρόσωπο ήταν στο πληροφορείο, δεν ήταν δηλός άνθρωπος. Ήταν γνώστης του αντικειμένου του αεροπλάνου και πίστευα ότι θα είχε τη δύναμη να μπορούσε να κάνει οτιδήποτε αν έμπαιρνε πιο νωρίς για να μπορέσουν να σωθούν οι άνθρωποι μέσα στο αεροπλάνο.
In fact, Prodromou had his commercial pilot's license. It was the first step towards his goal of becoming a captain for Helios.
It's the sort of day I'd like to be out flying.
Oh, you will, Andreas.
But all of his training wouldn't have helped save the jet. When he was seen at the controls, Flight 522 had been in the air for almost 3 hours. And the reason the Helios plane seemed to veer away from the F-16s following it was because its left engine was out of fuel. No matter what caused the alarms to sound, the ultimate reason for the crash was simple.
The DFTR and the CVR gave us absolute proof that the plane ran out of fuel. And this was the cause of the crash.
Scheduled as a 90-minute flight, the plane didn't have enough fuel to stay in the air for over 3 hours. But why had the plane flown so much longer than it was supposed to? Tsoulakis now knows who was in the cockpit of the plane and why it crashed. But to fully understand the mystery, he needs more information.
Mayday.
His investigators uncover a suspicious history of maintenance issues with the Helios jet. Issues that could help explain what happened on Flight 522. Less than a year before the crash, the same aircraft had suffered a rapid decompression. Lazaros Timetsian worked on that flight.
I was in the back of the aircraft at the time. There was a loud metallic bang, a clanging sound.
and the oxygen masks dropped in the cabin. Every step I was taking was difficult. It was hard to move, hard to breathe. In fact, I was starting to pant. I was panting for air.
As the plane began an immediate descent to 3,300 meters, all Temetsian could do was remain strapped in and wait. Once the plane reached a safe altitude, Temetsian inspected the rear door and was shocked by what he found.
I noticed that the aft service door was not fully locked. The hinges on the top and the bottom of the door were kind of displaced. I could pass my hand right through.
There were no injuries, and the plane made an emergency landing, and the door was inspected. But this wasn't the only problem crews had with this plane.
We would record faults in the cabin logbook constantly, and nothing would be done to rectify even these small little problems in the cabin. Engineers would take months to rectify even the slightest problem in the cabin.
There were more recent problems as well. A Helios ground engineer tells Solakis that on the very day of Flight 522, the 737 had another problem with its back door.
When we checked the flight log for the trip, we saw that we'd have to do some unscheduled maintenance.
The plane had arrived in Cyprus just after midnight on August the 14th. The cabin crew had heard loud banging noises and saw ice on the rear service door during the flight. It was scheduled to take off again just hours later. Soon after it landed, engineers began checking the problem. To make sure there's nothing wrong with the seal on the door, the engineers run a pressurization test. During normal flight, a plane's engines force air into the cabin. To ensure oxygen circulates during the trip, small valves in the rear allow some of it to leak out.
A pressurized airplane essentially is sort of like a pressurized can. Well, we pressurize the airplane so that the people inside can survive the environment that the airplane likes to operate in.
Switching digital pressure control unit from auto to manual.
Without the jet's engines running, the engineer uses the plane's auxiliary power unit to force air into the aircraft, and the cabin is pressurized for several minutes.
It's like looking for a leak in a tire. In this case, what you're having to do is pressurize the aircraft, use a barometer essentially to monitor the pressure inside, and look for leaks that way.
But there's no indication any air is escaping through the back door.
In this case, they felt that it was all right, and they completed the test.
The entire jet seems to be in good working order. After performing a series of additional routine maintenance procedures, the engineers signed off on their technical log. Investigators are faced with a dead end.
So explain again how you tested the pressure.
An explosive decompression could have explained the tragic events of Flight 522. If the oxygen had been suddenly sucked out of the jet, everyone on board could have been overcome. But not only did engineers check the problem, when the F-16s approached the plane near Athens, no damage was seen. There was no indication that the fuselage was punctured.
Mayday.
Investigators are still struggling to solve the mystery. What had overcome the passengers and crew of Helios Flight 522? And why was one flight attendant apparently unaffected?
5.
The discovery of one small switch holds the key to the entire crash. The crash of Helios Flight 522 is one of the most mysterious air disasters ever.
Helios 522, do you read? Over?
All investigators know for sure is that shortly after takeoff, the crew stopped communicating with air traffic controllers.
Helios 522, over.
Mayday.
Then, after 2.5 hours in the air, one of the plane's flight attendants was seen at the controls. Eventually, the plane ran out of fuel and crashed, killing 121 people. But investigators are stumped. They still don't know what had happened to the plane's captain or the rest of the crew.
Tell me about what happened the day of the flight.
They concentrate on the conversation between the pilot and the Helios engineer shortly after takeoff. As the plane passed through 3,700 meters, an alarm sounded in the cockpit.
Operations, this is Flight 522. Over.
Flight 522, what can I do for you?
We have a takeoff config warning on.
Pardon?
Our takeoff config warning is on.
Usually, the takeoff config warning is only triggered on the runway. But wreckage recovered at the crash site reveals no problems with the plane's flaps, landing gear, or anything else that could trigger the alarm. So why had it sounded? Chief Investigator Akrivos Tsolakis focuses on a small control panel found in the wreckage of the ravaged jet.
Are you sure this is the way it was found? It hasn't been moved at all.
We were lucky. Finding this panel, which had the switch on the manual position, was a major one.
Helios
the P5 pressurization panel ensures that passengers have enough air to breathe, even at high altitudes. Normally, pressurization takes place automatically. As the jet climbs, its engines force air into the plane as they power it through the sky. But when the pressurization switch is set to manual, both the captain and co-pilot are responsible for maintaining the cabin atmosphere using a controller.
So explain again how you tested the pressure.
When I went into the cockpit, I turned the pressurization switch to manual.
Tsolakis learns that during the early morning maintenance check on Helios 522, ground engineers had turned the P5 switch to manual. That allowed them to use the onboard generators to test the pressure seals on the plane's rear door without starting the engines. When the test was over, they didn't turn the switch back to automatic.
The procedure of pressurizing the aircraft has to do with setting the pressurization system from auto to manual. They were supposed to return the selector to the auto position.
Several hours later, when the flight crew entered the cockpit, the pressurization switch was still set to manual.
Lead air switches. It's bright today. Are you almost through? Pardon?
But neither the pilot nor co-pilot saw it. As a result, after takeoff, the cabin would not pressurize automatically. And the higher Flight 522 climbed, the thinner the atmosphere became. Not turning the switch back to automatic was a deadly, hidden danger.
Are you sure this is the way it was found? It hasn't been moved at all.
Tsolakis believes this panel could be the key to the disaster. Leaving one switch on manual could have led to all the other problems the plane faced. To prove he's right, he takes an unusual step. 4 months after the disaster, he takes an Olympic Airlines 737 on the same route flown by the Helios jet. If he's right about what caused the crash, this plane should react exactly like the doomed airliner did.
Are we ready to go?
When there is a complicated accident like this, I think reenactments should be performed. Of course, it's expensive to have a jetliner flying for 3 or 4 hours. But it is worthy if you have to come with some results which benefit to the overall investigation.
Make sure the P5 is set to manual. It's hard to see.
In the cockpit, Tsolakis has the crew turn the pressurization switch to manual. A green light indicates it's no longer on automatic. But in the bright glare of an early morning departure, the light is hard to see. As the reenactment flight climbs, oxygen is thinning quickly in the aircraft. The same thing happened on the Helios flight, triggering an alarm.
What is it? The takeoff config warning?
The alarm sounded, and that alarm was misinterpreted. Most of flight crew, they will never face an alarm with no pressurization in all their flight career because it's a rare event.
Soulakis confirms that the alarm went off because of the dangerously low air pressure in the aircraft. But he also discovers that the sound itself is identical to the takeoff config warning.
We have a takeoff config warning on.
But even if the flight crew did misinterpret the first alarm, they still had another chance to determine what the real problem was. At almost 5,000 meters, the plane's master caution light flashed on and stayed on for almost a minute.
We now have a master caution.
But once again, the pilots misinterpreted the cause of the alarm. The master caution light can indicate that the plane's systems are overheating. But it can also tell pilots the oxygen masks are down. In this case, it was doing both at the same time. But since the crew didn't think they were having pressurization problems, they focused on the plane's cooling systems.
The alarm about the non-cooling was a side effect of non-pressurization. Actually, it was not really that there was a high temperature inside the avionics bay, but it was the sensors that they were supposed to measure the temperature and the pressure in that area sensed that something was wrong.
On the recreation flight, investigators monitor instruments recording the same events occurring on board their aircraft. At the same time, they also begin to feel the effects of the lack of oxygen.
The first feelings you'd start to have were your ears would pop and you'd start feeling pressure in your sinuses. As you climb higher, you begin to feel almost giddy. It's almost like having a couple of drinks of alcohol.
The dwindling oxygen levels could also help explain some of the crew's bizarre behavior. When the ground engineer asked about pressurization,
Can you confirm that the pressurization panel is set to auto?
Captain Merton ignores the question and responds with one of his own.
Where are my equipment cooling circuit breakers?
You really don't notice it at first. It's amazing how subtle it can be in the early phases. They'd start feeling dizzy. They begin to lose the ability to think coherently. In a way, it traps you into the situation. You can't react to anything. Eventually, you're going to lose consciousness.
Soulakis believes that the captain may have been checking on the circuit breakers behind his seat when he and the co-pilot finally ran out of air. And unlike in the cabin, the oxygen masks in the cockpit do not automatically deploy if the atmosphere begins to thin.
Helios 522. Can you hear me?
On the other side of the locked cockpit door, no one in the cabin would have known that the plane was now flying itself. Nor would they have realized that a limitation of the passenger oxygen system had sealed the fate of everyone in the cabin. Passenger masks are supplied by a chemical generator above their seats. But the generators only produce enough oxygen to last about 12 minutes.
Well, the problem with the passenger masks is, for one thing, they're not designed to keep you oxygenated at a high altitude. What they're designed to do is give you enough oxygen so that you can survive until the pilots get the airplane down to a low altitude. In almost every event where we've had a decompression, that's been perfectly adequate.
For those who did put their masks on, they would have remained conscious for several minutes until their oxygen ran out. Then they too would have passed out.
Once you get up to 34,000 feet, you're talking useful consciousness of 30 to 60 seconds. Most of the people, once the hypoxia begins to cause them to lose consciousness, they're just going to go to sleep.
Without a flight crew, Helios 522 would have continued to Athens on autopilot. When the crew didn't take control, the autopilot would have put the jet in a holding pattern as it flew over the airport. Exactly the same thing will happen on the reconstruction flight if cabin pressure isn't restored. Soulakis asks the co-pilot to reset the P5 panel to auto before the jet continues to climb to its cruising altitude of just over 10,000 meters. Then, as it approaches Athens, Soulakis also has an F-16 shadow the jet, performing the recreation. He wants to confirm that it was Andreas Prodromou at the controls of Flight 522 when it went down.
We dressed one of our guys with the uniform of the steward. And he came in, he sat on the captain's chair, and the F-16 was looking at him. He was confirming that it was exactly what he saw on the accident plane.
The reconstruction also answers another question about the tragic fate of Helios Flight 522. The cockpit voice recorder picked up several strange noises. They're heard just before Prodromou enters the cockpit. Soulakis confirms that these sounds were made by Prodromou using the electronic keypad to unlock the cockpit door.
We confirmed all those items and during the reenactment flight, and it was very, very useful. It filled a lot of gaps we had.
Okay, take it down.
For Chief Investigator Soulakis, the reenactment flight has been convincing. There was no dramatic cabin failure. Instead, a series of small mistakes and misunderstandings had led to the worst air disaster in Greek history. "15 months after the crash, Greek authorities released the official report on Helios Airways Flight 522. But mysteries remain. What was happening in the cabin while the doomed airplane flew towards Athens? And why was Andreas Prodromou the only one conscious at the very end? The crash of Helios Flight 522 was the worst disaster in the history of Greek aviation. Like many crashes, it was a fatal combination of mechanical problems and human error. The final accident report details a tragic series of oversights and false assumptions made by the flight crew. Problems that could have been easily prevented turned deadly for all 121 people on board.
Where are my equipment cooling circuit breakers?
Behind the captain's seat. Can you see them?
But what the final report does not do is explain what happened in the cabin of the plane. What actions did the flight attendants take? And why was Andreas Prodromou still conscious after almost 3 hours?
Mayday. Mayday.
Interviews with Helios safety instructors and crew members paint a tragic picture of what may have occurred.
Everyone, please put your mask on. We're not sure what the trouble is, but remain calm and please remain seated.
Prodromou was sitting at the back of the cabin. When the oxygen masks fell, he would have waited for instructions from the cockpit. The flight attendants sitting at the front of the plane would have done the same, but none of them would have waited forever.
We made it an issue at Helios to emphasize that cabin crew should not entirely depend on their procedures, but to think on their feet and to adapt to any impending situation.
In most depressurizations, the plane descends quickly. But as minutes passed on the Helios flight, the plane continued to climb. Unsure of what was going on, Prodromou would have tried to contact the flight crew.
Captain Merton.
But he gets no response.
Can you give us an update, please? Captain Merton.
With no word from the cockpit, he would have soon realized that this was not a typical depressurization.
When there was no call out from the cockpit and the aircraft didn't start an emergency descent, there was absolutely no protocol. They would be winging it.
By now, Prodromou must have felt that something was terribly wrong. But to find out what the problem was, he had to leave his seat.
The oxygen available on the 737 is, of course, the dropout oxygen. 10% of those masks are available for the crew in case of a depressurization incident. There are extra masks per every seat row.
Taking advantage of the extra passenger masks, he could have made his way to the front of the plane, a process cabin crew called monkey swinging. But if more than 12 minutes had passed, his girlfriend and the other flight attendant may have still been in their seats, and like the passengers, overcome by hypoxia. But Prodromou was a scuba diver and a former soldier in the Cypriot Special Forces. His training may have helped him to stay alert a little longer.
Andreas δεν ήταν δειλός,
Andreas was not a coward. He was a brave person. Fearless, brave and very calm.
But to survive after the passenger oxygen system stopped working, he needed another solution. The 737 had 4 portable oxygen bottles. Each one could last more than an hour. All 4 bottles were found at the crash site. 3 of them appeared to have been used. While the F-16 pilot saw Prodromou in the cockpit just before the crash, it may not have been the first time he had gone in. As he did at the end of the flight, he could have used the security code to unlock the door earlier.
The procedure would be to enter the flight deck via the cockpit door. Initially to bang on the door, and then, if no response is forthcoming, to enter the code and enter the flight deck.
During the accident investigation, DNA was discovered on an oxygen mask in the cockpit that matched the co-pilot's. It's possible Prodromou used it to try and revive him.
You can still revitalize somebody for quite an extended period of time if you get to them before major brain damage is set in. And that's somewhat a variable situation depending on the person, depending on how long they're exposed to a high altitude.
But if he was in the cockpit earlier, why did he leave? No one will ever know.
Probably was a little bit disoriented, a little bit confused. He's reacting a lot slower than he normally would.
What was his state of mind? What was his physical condition? We think that he knew what was really the problem, but is that the real situation? It's a real question.
After 3 hours in the air, everyone who didn't have bottled oxygen would have been unconscious. As it approached Athens, Flight 522 was now a ghost plane.
Most of the victims, they probably still had heartbeats when the airplane crashed, but almost certainly were in an irreversible coma.
Hypoxia is no more painful than falling asleep. But for Andreas Prodromou, the flight must have been a nightmare. As the F-16s roared to meet the jet, and with his oxygen running out, he must have known that he too was almost out of time. Yet to the very end, he didn't give up. Prodromou made one last attempt to save the plane. When he returns to the cockpit, the young flight attendant who dreamed of becoming a pilot calls for help. But no one can hear him, probably because the radio was still tuned to Larnaca, the airport on Cyprus where the flight had taken off. Fighting hypoxia and struggling to control an airplane larger than any he had ever flown, Prodromou was in an impossible situation. Even if he could have landed the plane, it was now too late. Flight 522 was out of time and fuel. There are pictures of Andreas in Cyprus, in the cemetery where he and his girlfriend Haris are buried side by side.
Σαν πατέρας προς θυμούμαι το γιο μου.
As his father, my son is in front of me. Wherever I go, he's always there.
Σ' άφησε ένα μεγάλο κενό.
He left a very big gap.
Δυστυχώς, δεν θα ξεπεραστεί ποτέ.
We will never get over it.
There are pictures in Greece, too. On the hill north of Athens where Helios Flight 522 crashed, there are faded photographs of many of those who died. Bleached by the brilliant Mediterranean sun, they gaze over the rugged, ancient terrain, silent witnesses to one of the world's most bizarre and tragic airline disasters. Just minutes from Strasbourg Airport, an Airbus A320 slams into a mountaintop.
Delta Alpha, your position?
There are survivors.
And I'll panic because I'm going to burn.
But they are still in grave danger. It's bitterly cold, and what they don't realize is that no one knows where they are.
They could be anywhere in there.
Expect this in the jungle or the rainforest, but not in a highly populated area.
Before investigators can begin searching for what caused the crash of Air Inter Flight 148, they must first find the plane. January the 20th, 1992. Air Inter Flight 148 has departed from Lyon, France.
124.905, thank you.
Captain Christian Hequet and First Officer Joël Charubin are experienced pilots with over 12,000 hours of flying time between them. The flight is a short hop between Lyon in central France and the city of Strasbourg in the mountainous Alsace region. The French airline Air Inter caters mostly to business travelers and prides itself on being timely. Crews are motivated to avoid delays, as former Air Inter pilot Gérard Arnoux explains.
We were famous for a very short turnaround. And the faster we flew, the better wages we got.
Have we been flying for 35 minutes yet?
41 minutes.
The crew is flying an Airbus A320, one of the most technologically advanced commercial airplanes in the world. Even before takeoff, the pilots programmed the Autopilot to land on a specific runway in Strasbourg. The cockpit of the A320 is also very different from other planes. Instead of analog gauges, the pilots look mostly at digital displays.
Strasbourg, good evening. Runway News 05. Transition level 50. Wind 040 at 18 knots. Visibility 10 kilometers.
A recording from Strasbourg Airport informs the crew of a change in plan. Due to high winds and poor winter weather, they'll have to land on an alternate runway.
05 in service.
Not the one programmed into the autopilot.
05. What sort of wind are they giving us?
18 knots.
18 knots.
Captain Heke doesn't like the idea of changing runways.
No chance.
He was hoping to use runway 23, an approach that provides the autopilot with a precise navigational fix. The new runway, runway 05, is surrounded by mountainous terrain that can interrupt radio signals sent to the autopilot.
You know, if we go with the runway 05 procedure, we... Oh, no.
Captain Heke suggests a compromise.
I'm putting back runway 23. Otherwise, I couldn't make the ILS interception.
He'll program the autopilot to fly towards runway 23. But near the airport, the captain will take over the controls and make a visual landing on runway 05.
You're taking 23 then?
Yes!
Ladies and gentlemen, we are commencing our descent. We ask you to please return to your seats.
Nicholas Skourias is a university graduate student.
It was a quiet day. I was expecting to go to see my girlfriend in Strasbourg, so I was very happy.
Roger 854, proceed to GTQ air level 140, contact Reims. Delta Alpha, Strasbourg.
Yes, we intend to proceed to do an ILS on runway 23, then an indirect for runway 05 after that.
The Strasbourg controller considers the captain's plan.
Delta Alpha.
He warns that there will likely be a delay due to heavy traffic.
Given that we're going to have 3 takeoffs on 05, you risk waiting in a stack at 5,000 feet.
We're not going to mess about like that, descending at full speed. If they had warned us in advance, cripes!
Delta Alpha, Strasbourg.
I hear you.
Aware of the captain's frustration, the controller offers assistance.
If you want, I can take you with the radar to lead you to Andlo at 5,000.
Andlo is a navigational point on the approach to runway 05. It helps pilots align the plane for landing.
Yeah, that's good.
Oh, yeah. Okay, then, turn left to heading 230 degrees. 148.
Turn left to heading 230 degrees.
There you are. That will save you some time.
Since runway 05 doesn't allow for a full autopilot approach, the captain must calculate the angle of descent on his own.
That makes 3.3 degrees.
Donc 3,3, c'est tout à fait normal, oui.
3.3 degrees is a normal flight angle that provides a good slope for landing.
Doucement, la bonne pente, voilà.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are continuing our descent.
The flight from Lyon to Strasbourg was quite short. I think 50 or 45 minutes. Nothing special. It was very natural and very ordinary.
Thank you.
Turn left, steer 90. 090 degrees, Delta Alpha.
The controller talks Flight 148 through the last turn to align the plane with the runway, now 25 kilometers away. Then, First Officer Cherubin notices the plane is slightly off course.
We're headed inside. You're inside there. You should have started with 070.
Yeah.
At least that much.
The controller also notices that the plane is off course.
Enter Delta Alpha.
It has missed aligning itself with Andlo, the runway's electronic guidepost.
Delta Alpha, you're passing to the right of Andlo.
Nevertheless, he authorizes the landing.
Authorized for final approach 05.
Delta Alpha.
The captain initiates the landing sequence.
Flaps towards 2.
Flaps towards 2. Flaps at 2.
Gear down.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to land in a few minutes.
Heke notices that the plane is traveling too fast, so he extends the speed brakes. They disrupt airflow over the wing, which helps create more drag to slow the plane.
We have to watch our descent.
The approach axis.
The first officer is more concerned with their horizontal position in relation to the runway.
It was 60. Check it out.
Right.
But before the crew can adjust their course,
Delta Alpha, your position? Air Inter, Delta Alpha, Strasbourg.
the crash is catastrophic. The A320 has flown into the side of a mountain.
Delta Alpha, your position?
Flight 148 is no longer on radar, nor responding to radio contact. An emergency is declared at Strasbourg Airport.
This is the last hit we got. We were flying about 20 kilometers away from the airport.
Officials need to pinpoint the crash site, but it's not as easy as it might seem. The airport's radar is not recorded. There has been no signal from the plane's emergency beacon, and surprisingly, no one has reported seeing a plane go down.
It could be anywhere in here.
The proposed search area covers more than 20 square kilometers of dense forest just outside Strasbourg. Nicolas Scoria survives the crash of Air Inter Flight 148 with only minor injuries.
I took off my seatbelt, I get up, I tried to find my suitcase in the lockers, but there wasn't any lockers. I realized that I was alive. It was a crash. I saw a fire in front of me, and I panicked because I said to myself, I'm going to burn. I went to the back of the plane, of what remained of the plane. I found some other survivors.
Come on! It's gonna blow!
I was afraid of the explosion. I was panic.
With the smell of leaking jet fuel in the air, the survivors move away from the burning plane.
We stayed together, waiting for the first aid.
But the wait will be longer than anyone might expect.
The first reaction that we have after the crash was, okay, in half an hour, 1 hour, most, and the worst, okay, the rescue team will be here. And it wasn't here.
1 hour after the crash, rescuers still have no idea where the wreckage lies. Scourias and the others now face a new ordeal. Surviving sub-zero temperatures in a dark and isolated forest. 2.5 hours after Flight 148 disappeared from radar near Strasbourg Airport, the missing plane has still not been located. Amidst growing tension, the French Aviation Bureau, the BEA, sends in its lead investigator, Jean Pariès.
I immediately called my two main investigators, and we organized the GO team, and we got prepared to rush to the site as soon as this site was located somewhere.
The delay feels like an eternity.
A little bit surprisingly long. We can expect this in the jungle or the rainforest, but not exactly in a highly dense populated area like the Strasbourg area.
With no help in sight, Skouras returns to the wreckage to look for more survivors.
I think that some people that die could have survived if the first aid come sooner.
Nearly 1,000 people search for the missing plane. But 3 hours after the crash, there's still no sign of it. Frustrated, Skouras goes looking for help. He stumbles into a TV crew trying to find the crash. But with no wreckage in sight, they react with skepticism.
They didn't expect survivors from an airplane crash.
Hey, you have to believe me!
They didn't believe that I was one of the survivors, but believe me, I was, because my face was black due to the smoke, the kerosene, and so on.
Come on!
The journalists follow him back to the crash site, where they discover 8 other survivors. Finally, the first rescuers arrive. The crash site is located near the top of the 2,500-foot Mont Saint-Odile, 19 kilometers from the runway.
They found us after 4 hours and 30 minutes. So it was a mess. I was very, very disappointed that at 20 kilometers from Strasbourg, and they couldn't find us.
A total of 87 passengers and crew have died, including the pilot and co-pilot. The survivors begin to tell their stories, but no one reports anything that might explain why the plane crashed.
I don't know what happened. We were landing. I lost all consciousness. We must have hit the trees.
Bob McIntosh, an American NTSB investigator, arrives at the crash site.
The BEA of France recognized the international attention would be on this accident, even though it was a domestic accident. He invited a group of international accident investigators to come and participate.
Welcome to the team.
The first priority for investigators is to retrieve the plane's black boxes.
We have not removed the recorders yet. Good.
With the boxes trapped in the burning tail section, any delay could prove costly.
We're very anxious about the state of the tape inside. Will it be possible to use it? Will we get the critical information we need?
In France, aviation accidents are also investigated by the justice system. Parias and his team are not allowed access to the site until judicial officials secure the black boxes.
I had a visual picture of the gendarme, Aryan, transport police standing around keeping us away from the wreckage for a while. And we're very suspicious of these international observers.
Maybe we should wait.
Even taking photographs, which was somewhat surprising to us.
In a previous crash, the crash of Air France Flight 296 in 1988, investigators waited 10 days before turning the black boxes over to police. Rumors persisted that these boxes had been tampered with. This time, police are keeping investigators at bay.
I can recall seeing the glowing embers and seeing the flight recorder sitting there and not being able to intervene and say, get that thing cooled down as soon as you can.
After midnight, the boxes are retrieved from the plane and sent for analysis. Investigators can only hope it's not too late.
They was extremely hot. They looked damaged, they looked burned.
découvre l'Airbus disloqué à 500 mètres.
In the light of day, investigators get some of their first clues from the crash site itself. They discover why the plane's emergency locator beacon didn't send a signal.
It was actually destroyed by the impact.
The beacon is located inside the cockpit and is designed to start working after a crash. Its failure suggests an unusually forceful impact with the ground.
We had this first feeling that the descent was abnormally steep.
Investigators examine the engines to see if they may have stalled before impact.
If you find the blades curved and a lot of wood sucked inside the engines, then you understand that the engines were working properly.
And that's exactly what they find. The plane clearly had power, yet it plowed steeply into a mountainside without ever sending out a distress signal. Investigators are puzzled. They hope that the box which recorded the plane's flight data will help them solve the mystery.
Those particular recorders had the best survival record of any recorders. They were the top of the line as far as survivability is concerned.
The black box is designed to survive temperatures up to 1100 degrees Celsius for half an hour. The tape recorder inside is protected by a capsule filled with water.
When the recorder heats up, the water turns to steam, absorbing the energy, and actually vents out through a little hole in the crash enclosure.
But when the flight data recorder is opened, investigators make a troubling discovery.
The FDR was totally damaged. Impossible to read anything from it.
It was subjected to heat beyond the 30 minutes. The recorder was just never designed to withstand that kind of sustained heat.
And so we were very disappointed.
There's now only one hope for recovering the plane's flight data, a device called a Quick Access Recorder, or QAR. Maintenance workers use the QAR to access the plane's computers, but it also records some flight data. Unlike the black boxes, the QAR is stored near the cockpit.
Quick access recorders are not protected at all. They're up in the front end of the aircraft, typically in the electronics bay. They're generally destroyed just from the impact damage.
Investigators are encouraged to discover that in this case, the QAR has survived. But on closer examination, their optimism turns to frustration.
The last 20 centimeters of the tape were burned and stretched and were damaged to the point that we could not use them into a machine. We couldn't read it.
Investigators are desperate to retrieve the data, so they take a chance on an experimental technique. Known as the garnet technique, a light is shone through a mineral lens made of garnet.
Use a garnet stone to visualize the magnetic pulses that are actually recorded on the tape.
The special lens helps the technicians differentiate between the positive and negative magnetic pulses, which translate as binary digits, or bits.
There's 768 bits per second, so that's a lot of ones and zeros. You have to be very precise in moving the tape under the lens or the garnet to make sure you don't miss a bit or read the same bit twice, you know? So it's difficult.
Analyzing the data is even more painstaking.
It took about a day to read a second of recording. Any additional second recovered could reveal something that would make a difference.
The effort to retrieve all the QAR data could take a month or more. In the meantime, the focus of the investigation shifts to the cockpit voice recorder. It was positioned just above the other black box.
The cockpit voice recorder, which was just inches away, but outside of the ashes, had air passing over it, survived.
Runway 23. Otherwise...
The recording reveals the captain's anxiety early on in the flight.
You're taking 23 then?
Yes!
Investigators know that landing on runway 05 requires what's called a non-precision approach. That means pilots receive electronic guidance only on their horizontal position, left and right. They get no guidance when it comes to altitude.
The non-precision approach is significantly less accurate. Why, it's not really difficult, but they are less comfortable.
05. What sort of wind are they giving us?
The non-precision approach increases the demands on the pilots. Investigators can also hear that the captain had concerns about landing on runway 05.
48 Delta Alpha, you are number 1 for VOR DME runway 05.
Runway 05.
10 nautical. That won't work.
It's a lot of distress over a non-precision approach.
Wondering what can cause such distress, investigators research pilot training at Air Inter. They find that most pilots did not have extensive training making non-precision landings in the new A320.
I think we should have had double the training compared to an older plane.
Investigators asked the airline for detailed records on the pilot's history of runway approaches. They're intrigued by what they discover. Captain Heke had landed at Strasbourg countless times, but he had never landed an A320 there using a non-precision approach.
I'm not going to mess around like that descending at full speed.
Clearly, the captain was uneasy about having to execute a landing he had never made before.
I think the captain was worried about making it in a minimum amount of time, and the minimum amount of delay.
Have we been flying for 35 minutes yet?
And the co-pilot was worried about not getting in trouble by offending the captain.
At least that much.
More research into the pilot's work history offers yet another revelation. While the two pilots had flown more than 12,000 hours between them, they were both still relatively new to the highly advanced A320.
It's 05 in service.
The aviation community misunderstood the magnitude of changes brought by the new Airbus A320.
The captain had only 162 hours in the A320, and the co-pilot even less, just 61 hours.
Behind this accident scenario, there's an issue of confidence of the crew in themselves, in the aircraft.
18 knots. No chance.
They were not prepared, really, to fly in this kind of condition.
If they had warned us in advance, cripes!
Investigators conclude that the crew's training was insufficient. But that alone does not explain the crash.
Merde!
Investigators search for other factors in the crash of Flight 148. They review the conversations between the crew and air traffic controllers.
If you want, I can give you radar headings and take you to Andlo at 5,000.
Yeah, that's good.
The radar vector makes flying easier. The captain was happy because it was reducing his workload.
Turn left, steer 90.
With the controller's assistance, this landing should have been very simple. But when investigators reconstruct the plane's trajectory using radar information from various stations around the airport, they discover a shocking error.
The 090 heading started here.
090, 0 degrees, Delta Alpha.
But it won't take them to Andlo. Last radar vector the controller gave was incorrect. It sent them...
Thank you.
...closer to the mountain.
There were, of course, because of following the heading they got from the radar vectoring. They found themselves in this undershoot situation.
You're inside there. You should have started with 070.
Yeah.
Investigators are also troubled by the controller's choice of words when he warned the pilots, incorrectly, that they were headed to the right.
Delta Alpha, you're passing to the right of Anlo.
From the pilot's perspective, the plane was on the left side of the runway, not the right. It could only add to their confusion.
Le contrôleur, en fait, il a fait un...
It was very poor guidance because he didn't employ the usual terminology.
Et il n'a pas utilisé la phraséologie standard.
Investigators recommend that controllers use only compass points when giving directions. Never the words right and left. The controller's mistakes clearly brought the plane closer to the mountain.
Turn left, steer 90. 090.
But once again, investigators feel they don't have the whole story.
It's not something totally abnormal to start a descent from this situation.
Flaps towards 2.
Flaps towards 2.
It's not what you expected to do every day, but it's not outside the tolerance of the concept of this approach.
Gear down.
When investigators study the plane's reconstructed flight path, they discover something more alarming than the plane's horizontal misdirection. As it circled the mountain, the plane inexplicably entered a dangerously steep and rapid descent.
Perhaps 2.5 times the normal rate of descent.
That's lethal at that altitude.
Without the steep descent, they would have cleared the mountain.
If the vertical trajectory had been correct, they would have no problem at all.
Finding the cause of that sudden descent is now key to understanding why 87 people died in one of the most advanced passenger planes on Earth.
Authorized for final approach 05.
The descent was initiated at 1800 hours, 19 minutes and 38 seconds. That
Delta Alpha
is the point of no return.
By studying Flight 148's trajectory, investigators determined that the rapid descent began 60 seconds before the crash.
Delta Alpha.
There is no indication on tape that the descent was deliberate. How it happened and why the crew didn't notice is a mystery.
It should be a no-brainer. Keeping track of the altitude.
The cockpit altimeter gives pilots a constant readout of their altitude.
Altimeter, that's a very precise instrument. They become very reliable. They're accurate to within 5 or 10 feet.
Ignoring it would be a major error in flying protocol.
Flaps towards 2.
The recording reveals just one single remark from the crew about their descent.
We have to watch our descent.
It occurred 16 seconds before the crash. The captain had just extended the speed brakes.
The aircraft was accelerating abnormally. The captain started to realize there was something wrong with the descent rate.
But the first officer changed the subject.
The approach axis. We're hitting the axis a half point off.
There. It was 60. Check it out.
He refocused the captain's attention on the lateral situation rather than the vertical situation, which was the main problem, of course. And they both failed to recognize this situation.
I think they were planning they were going to break out of the clouds so they'd be able to see the runway, and they wouldn't need to do the full instrument approach.
It was 60. Check it.
But the plane never left the clouds.
There's an old adage in aviation. Rocks have been known to hide out in those clouds.
It now seems clear that the crew was not monitoring their altitude closely enough. But a bigger mystery remains.
We can only guess why.
What caused that deadly descent? After months of work, investigators may finally have the answer. All the available flight data from the damaged quick access recorder has been recovered.
We were very anxious to be able to read as much as we could.
The data confirms that just before the crash, the plane was speeding towards the ground at an extremely high rate, 3,300 feet per minute. It also confirms that the angle of descent was dangerously steep, much greater than the 3.3 degrees selected by the captain.
3 degrees.
That's quite a difference.
Investigators now wonder, did the autopilot malfunction? Did it somehow fail to obey the captain's safe descent angle and send the plane into a deadly nosedive?
But what state was it in before the accident?
Unfortunately, the flight control unit which houses the autopilot is too badly damaged to provide any definitive answers.
We could never demonstrate that this FCU on this aircraft during this flight functioned properly or not.
But then, when he returns to studying the flight data, Paries discovers something that may finally reveal the cause of the crash. He notices a similarity between two key numbers: the plane's vertical speed, 3,300 feet per minute, and the intended flight path angle, 3.3 degrees.
Coincidence?
Paries uses a flight simulator to test a new theory.
Can you show me a descent of 3,300 feet per minute?
He believes that the similarity is no mere coincidence. On the autopilot, there are two descent modes: flight path angle and vertical speed. But they are both displayed on the same window. So 3,300 is abbreviated to 33.
Now, show me a flight angle of minus 3.3 degrees.
The problem on this aircraft was that the two values were visible on the same window and controlled by the same knob.
3.3 degrees.
Minus 3.3 degrees.
Paries strongly suspects that the confusing display tripped up Captain Hackey.
So it wouldn't be hard to make that mistake, would it?
The confusion is quite easy between the two modes if you don't do it carefully.
If the captain failed to push the mode selector knob, then entering 33 would not have initiated a safe 3.3 degree angle of descent. Instead, it would have put the plane into a deadly rate of descent of 3,300 feet per minute. Two months after the crash, another Air Inter plane enters a dangerously steep descent for the same reason.
The crew only discovered the problem when they broke out of the clouds.
Those pilots also confused the plane's flight path angle with its vertical speed.
They were lucky enough to have a much higher cloud base so they could correct the problem.
Further research reveals an industry-wide problem with the A320.
Many people confuse these modes, especially during training, and many of them fell in the trap even after the training.
Eager to test his new theory, Jean Paries programs a simulator with all the known data from Flight 148.
Okay.
He then inputs the same rate of descent he believes the Air Inter pilots selected. If Paries is correct, the simulation will end with the plane hitting the mountain. But it doesn't.
We're missing something.
Strangely, this didn't lead to a crash. Every approach would overfly this obstacle by a significant margin.
Have we factored in the wind?
We started to work on other alternate hypotheses.
Let's try again, but initiate the turn sooner.
But nothing was really credible.
No matter how hard he tries, Paries cannot simulate the crash. Unable to explain why, he turns to the plane's manufacturer for help.
Thanks for bringing this to my
After
attention.
much research, an Airbus designer comes to Paris with an explanation about a little-known element of the Autopilot's design. In emergency situations where the A320 needs to change direction quickly, the Autopilot is programmed to reverse the plane's direction at twice the normal rate.
The reaction of the Autopilot would be much faster. And these cases were typically when you were descending and asking the Autopilot to climb, or climbing and asking the Autopilot to descend. We immediately went back to the data at the very second at which the descent was commanded by the crew.
Gear down.
Paris discovers a tragic coincidence.
Sadly, we found that at this very second, there was turbulence.
There was an ascent. It's very slight, but there it is.
The momentary turbulence caused the plane to climb slightly.
And this led to a positive 600 feet per minute vertical speed for maybe half a second.
It was during that same half second that the crew commanded the plane to descend.
It was 60, check it out.
The Autopilot read this as an emergency requiring a blazingly fast descent.
That could be it.
Investigators now contemplate a terrible thought. Could a random gust of wind, hitting at exactly the wrong split second, have been the difference between life and death?
Here it comes.
And we got a crash.
Paris's theory explains every aspect of the crash. The crew's confusion with the Autopilot display
3.3 degrees.
caused the plane to descend dangerously close to the mountain. Turbulence and an obscure safety feature brought it even closer. It was a fatal combination.
It's a fascinating lesson about the random dimension of accidents. Half a second before, half a second later, they wouldn't have the accident.
The discovery of a confusing cockpit display has enormous implications for the entire industry.
The flight instrumentation of aircraft like the DC-10, MD-11s, the 747s and so on, all the Boeing products and all the commuter products that were using that avionics suite had this vulnerability about it.
Investigators now face a daunting question affecting aircraft safety around the world. If the design of the Autopilot interface isn't changed, how many more people could die? There's mounting evidence that the design of the Autopilot interface on Airbus A320s led the Air Inter pilots to accidentally dial in a dangerous rate of descent.
3.3 degrees.
We felt a need to start the industry to work on this.
The plane's manufacturer, Airbus, responds immediately.
The main change, which was very quickly made, was to change the display window.
With the new design, if a pilot selects a vertical speed of 3,300, the entire 4-digit number is displayed.
So the confusion between an angle and a vertical speed was no longer possible.
For investigators, only one mystery remains. All Airbus A320 jets are designed to be equipped with a safety device known as a Ground Proximity Warning System, or GPWS.
Which is a downward-looking, single-purpose radar that tells you how high you are above the ground directly beneath the airplane. And if it gets to be too low, it'll set off a warning.
Pull up, terrain. Pull up.
But Captain Heke
We have to watch our descent.
never received a warning for one very simple reason. His A320 didn't have that alarm.
The first question, of course, was why the aircraft was not equipped.
So it's not part of the minimum equipment list.
The Air and Terror Management had decided they did not like the false warnings that had been produced by GPWS equipment.
Normally, most planes fly slower than 250 knots when under 10,000 feet, but we flew at 350 knots until the final approach. So at those speeds, GPWS was always giving off false alarms.
Dans ces conditions, parce qu'il générait des fausses alarmes.
This decision, while legal, prevented the pilots from having one last line of defense before crashing into the mountain.
C'est pas possible d'imaginer un instant.
It's impossible to imagine that the pilot wouldn't have pulled up if he'd heard the alarm.
We should have a GPWS on commercial flights in any case, yes. That's an obvious conclusion.
The report will list these causes: flight deck aeronautics.
Investigators conclude that there was no single cause for the crash of Flight 148.
Training, lack of GPWS.
The tragedy involved an ill-fated combination of many different weaknesses in the airline industry.
We made 35 or so recommendations, including pilot training, about the ground proximity warning system, and so on.
The recommendations lead to sweeping changes. Pilots must now have more A320 training before getting behind the controls.
One of the two pilots now need to have at least 300 hours on the plane. They estimated that 300 hours were enough.
Another change, the design of a more heat-resistant black box.
The FAA did a test, did some studies what the thermal characteristics of post-crash fires were, came up with a value of 260 degrees C for 10 hours.
Delta Alpha, your position? Air Inter, Delta Alpha, Strasbourg.
As a result of the Strasbourg crash, the A320 is now a safer plane.
You can only get this change if there is what people perceive to be a good reason. And sadly, a good reason is still an accident.
But improved aviation technology is still no substitute for well-trained, well-prepared pilots.
There's an old axiom in aviation that you taught early on, that never let an airplane take you somewhere that your brain hasn't visited at least 5 minutes ahead of time. This is an excellent example of a flight crew that didn't follow that particular axiom.
Gentlemen, we're beginning our descent towards Amsterdam Schiphol Airport.
To turn that off, Vanessa. Thank you.
Turkish Airlines Flight 1951 is preparing to land in Amsterdam.
Amsterdam, Turkish 1951, descending to 7,000, speed 250.
The crew is flying a state-of-the-art Boeing 737.
Flaps 15.
Localizer alive, localizer capture.
In the final moments of the flight, the landing turns into a catastrophe. The plane falls like a rock. The crash of Turkish Airlines Flight 1951 involves the most popular plane on Earth. With nearly 1.5 million passengers boarding 737s every day, investigators need to figure out if the problem was with the plane or with the pilots flying it.
Mayday, Mayday.
On the morning of February the 25th, 2009, Turkish Airlines Flight 1951 becomes the first plane to crash at Amsterdam's Schiphol Airport in more than 10 years.
It smashed into the ground really hard. It made a tremendous noise.
The plane hits the ground in a muddy field just north of runway 18 right. Since the crash was so close to the airport, rescue workers arrive quickly. Most of the passengers have survived, but many are badly injured. Survivors are taken straight to local hospitals. Images of the Amsterdam accident quickly spread around the world. This is the third crash of a passenger jet in the past 6 weeks. The sudden nature of this accident adds to the mystery. It doesn't take long for the Dutch safety board to arrive at the scene. They will be investigating this accident, but they won't be alone. The crash involved an American-made plane, so the US National Transportation Safety Board sends Joe Sador, one of its most experienced investigators, to Amsterdam.
When it's a non-US registered aircraft that crashes overseas, such as this Turkish Airlines, we are the state of manufacture and design of the airframe, and also in this case the engines.
Fuselage in 3 large pieces, engines forward of the main wreck site.
Flight 1951 was one of the most advanced aircraft in the skies, the Boeing 737-800 series. It's designed to travel longer routes at higher altitudes.
The new generation 737 is still the best airplane Boeing ever built. We developed an airplane that had an improved wing, improved avionics, simpler systems that required less maintenance.
Investigators know this isn't just any plane. The 737 is the world's best-selling commercial jet. Finding out why this one crashed is imperative. There are more than 5,000 of them in the skies. They carry about 1.5 million passengers a day. Investigators must quickly determine if there's a flaw with the plane that could cause another accident. What they know so far is that Flight 1951 had been traveling from Istanbul, Turkey, to Amsterdam. There were 128 passengers on board the early morning flight, including 4 engineers from Boeing.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our descent towards Amsterdam Schiphol Airport. Please raise your seatbacks to the upright position and stow away your tray tables.
There was no mention on board of any kind of trouble in the cockpit. The crash has killed 9 people, including 3 members of the Boeing team and the pilots in the cockpit.
See if you can get me some aerials of the crash site.
There are eerie similarities to another recent accident involving a Boeing aircraft. British Airways Flight 38.
Approximately a year before this, there had been a 777 short landing at Heathrow, which had a dual-engine flameout.
In that accident, a Boeing 777 fell to the ground short of the runway. The British Airways pilots reported that both their engines stopped delivering power just before landing. At the time of the Turkish Airways crash, the cause of that accident hasn't been found. Like in that case, investigators have plenty of clues to work with. The plane and its engines are largely intact. The flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder are found in good condition. There are also plenty of survivors to describe what happened. According to the passengers, the landing had been routine, but then suddenly the plane simply dropped out of the sky and hit the ground. But perhaps the biggest clue comes from the crash site itself. The wreckage is not spread out. It tells investigators that the plane could not have been traveling forward at high speed when it hit the ground.
The way the aircraft had crashed, it did appear to be some sort of a landing accident in which there was moderate control of some sort.
The pattern of debris and the passenger reports point investigators to an immediate suspect: the engines.
The engines issue was a very big issue in my thought process at the time, initially.
There's no evidence of fire on the fuselage. In many crashes, fuel in the plane's tanks ignites on impact. The lack of fire raises an obvious question. Did the engines stop running because Flight 1951 had simply run out of gas?
That was one of the first thoughts that I had was, did this airplane have fuel aboard? Because otherwise, how does a 737 literally fall out of the sky on approach to an airport?
But the location and condition of the plane's engines suggest that perhaps they didn't quit in flight.
Sure looks like it was running.
When we first looked at where the engines ended up, the initial impression was that they probably were producing thrust at impact, given that they were so far forward of the main wreckage. That was just a very general conclusion.
Only the flight data recorder can tell investigators how much power the engines were generating in the seconds before the crash.
Lots of fuel. Rules that out.
It doesn't take long to discover that there was plenty of fuel in the plane's tanks. Flight 1951 definitely did not run out of gas. Passengers report that in the final seconds before the crash, the plane hit what felt like turbulence. It points investigators to a well-known culprit, a microburst. A microburst is a powerful column of air that shoots out of storm clouds. It can literally slam a low-flying plane to the ground.
If an airplane flies into that at approach speeds, you're not going to be flying anymore. You're going to come out of the sky. Certainly, it was one of the things that all of us took a look at the beginning. Was there a microburst?
In 1985, a Delta Airlines flight was caught in a microburst while landing at Dallas-Fort Worth Airport. The plane hit the ground short of the runway. 137 people were killed. Investigators learned that there were heavy clouds above the airport at the time of the accident. A powerful gust of wind may well have accompanied them. The flight data recorder will have recorded wind speeds outside the plane. Investigators will need to analyze the flight data to prove the microburst theory. In the meantime, the rescue has led to an unusual discovery.
There was 3 pilots in the cockpit, which is unusual. This is a 2-crew cockpit. So why was that 3rd pilot there?
Since none of the 3 pilots survived the accident, it's all the more urgent for investigators to retrieve the data from the cockpit voice recorder. It records conversations in the cockpit. They're in luck.
Because of the way that the aircraft crashed, access to the recorders and the condition of the recorders was excellent.
The reason for the 3rd pilot is soon uncovered.
Flying standard arrival route. Visibility 3,500 meters, expected to decrease to 2,500 meters.
For First Officer Murat Sezer, this had been a training flight of sorts. He was new to the airline and was being shown the intricacies of landing at Amsterdam's airport.
In the Jepson charts, which is what all pilots use to navigate to and from Schiphol, there's 102 pages of information on Schiphol alone. So there's dozens of approaches.
Runway 18 right has 3 high-speed exits to the left.
The captain, Hassan Arisan, was doing double duty. He was training his first officer.
Make small corrections as we get close to the runway.
And was in command of Flight 1951. It's because Captain Arisan was teaching that there was the 3rd pilot in the cockpit. Olgay Ozgur was a safety pilot. He was there to keep an eye on the flight's progress during this training mission.
The purpose of that 2nd set of eyes is to make sure that the captain and the first officer, if they're in a situation where it's a little bit of a training portion of the flight, that they don't miss something.
We got a clean recording?
The voice recorder reveals that the 3 crew members began preparations for landing when still above 8,500 feet.
Amsterdam, Turkish 1951, descending to 7,000, speed 250.
But the voice recorder has picked up an unusual sound, a warning that makes no sense at this stage of the flight.
One of the investigators from Boeing was a engineering pilot that came and helped with the CDR. And he's listening to see when, or are there any unusual sounds that can be heard that would not be normal.
Speed Speed okay for ILS 18 right. Descent 4000, ILS 18 right.
The alarm keeps sounding. It's the landing gear configuration warning horn. Captain Arasan continually dismisses it.
Turkish 1951, descent 4000, ILS 18 right. Landing gear.
Is that the landing gear warning? They're at 8,300 feet here.
The warning is a solid clue, but investigators can't yet see how it could possibly have caused a crash. The crew of Turkish Airlines Flight 1951 got warnings to extend their landing gear while still thousands of feet in the air.
On the initial listen, we heard a gear warning horn occur as the aircraft was approaching, when it was still up and it was coming in about 10,000 feet and below.
Investigators now turn to the flight data recorder to help solve some of the mystery surrounding this flight. The analysis of wind speeds outside the aircraft is completed. It's clear, none are drastic enough to have brought down the plane.
Evidence of a microburst.
But the flight data recorder does provide some valuable insight into the cause of the landing gear warning. One of the instruments that measures altitude had the plane already on the ground.
When we looked and saw the radio altimeter data, on the recorder it showed about 8,000 feet, and then immediately it went down to about -8. -8 feet is an indication that the aircraft's on the ground, but of course it's still at 2,000 feet.
The Boeing 737 is equipped with two separate altimeters. One measures air pressure to determine the plane's height above sea level. That reading is displayed prominently in the cockpit on both pilots' flight display.
10, set, sir.
The plane is also equipped with a radio altimeter. It's made up of 4 antennas. 2 transmit signals to the ground, and 2 others read the signal that bounces back to determine the plane's height.
It's precise. It's very, very precise. Pressure altimeters can sometimes be not as accurate, and radar altimeters are 100% accurate if they're working properly.
One antenna feeds the reading to the first officer's display. The other feeds the captain's instruments. In the case of Flight 1951, the captain's side was wrong most of the flight. Investigators go back over the CVR and make a puzzling discovery.
Amsterdam, Turkish 1951, descending to 7,000, speed 250. Radio altimeter.
Captain Arasan seems to have known that the landing gear warning was being caused by a faulty radio altimeter.
The airplane thought that it was low to the ground and the gear was not down. And the captain recognized that the problem was really in the radio altimeter, showing him that they should be on the ground, and he goes, it's just the radio altimeter.
Throughout much of the approach, the captain's radio altimeter had been displaying a reading of -8 feet, triggering the warning to lower the gear.
They treated it like it was a nuisance.
Turkish 1951.
Descend to 2,000.
2,000, 1951.
Investigators dig for any other abnormalities. They learn that with Flight 1951 still about 17 kilometers from the airport, controllers directed the pilots to begin their final turn to line up with the runway.
Turkish 1951, left heading
210, cleared approach.
18 right.
Left 210, cleared ILS, Turkish 1951.
210, set, sir.
This turn puts Flight 1951 in line with runway 18 right. It's equipped with an instrument landing system, which sends out a signal outlining the ideal descent path to the foot of the runway. The autopilot follows that glide path until the plane is a few hundred feet from the ground. Then the pilot takes over. It makes landing almost effortless.
The ILS is pretty easy to follow. It's a video game. My daughter has flown in a simulator and can land a 737 using the ILS.
The crew begins configuring their plane for landing, unfazed by the warning horn that's repeatedly triggered by the malfunctioning radio altimeter.
Flaps 15.
10 kilometers out, Flight 1951 picks up the ILS signal that will guide the plane to the runway.
Localizer alive. Localizer capture.
The safety pilot, Olgay Ojgur, now reminds Captain Arasan about the failed altimeter.
We have radio altimeter failure, sir.
Okay.
Turkish 1951.
Runway 18 right. Clear to land.
Clear to land, thank you.
Investigators are stumped. The crew knew about the malfunction and continued their approach. How had it then caused them to crash? Clearly, there was more to this accident than a faulty altimeter.
The whole premise of airline safety, the way we build the airplanes, the way we fly them, is based on the idea that we can have any number of failures and we should still be able to arrive safely. The radio altimeter is just one instrument. There's no way in the world that that one instrument, if it fails, should be a major cause of worry that we're going to have a crash.
Investigators wonder if the crew had been given proper guidance for their approach. They turn to exchanges between the pilots and the controller who guided them in. They carefully review every instruction.
Turkish 1951, descend to 4,000. Speed okay for ILS 18 right. Turkish 1951, descend to 2,000. Turkish 1951, left heading 210, cleared approach 18 right.
By following the controller's instructions, the crew made their final turn much too close to the runway.
So to intercept properly, they should be here.
International guidelines call for approaching planes to intercept the signal that guides them to the runway from below. It's so pilots don't have to make any drastic last-minute course corrections to get to it.
To intercept here, they had to descend.
But Flight 1951 was given instructions that brought it to the threshold of the glide slope while still way above it. It's a common practice at Schiphol because it gets planes to the runway faster.
Because they were so close, they had to capture the glide slope from above. Although it is an unusual situation, it is one that can be handled by a flight crew if it is managed properly.
Approaching a glide slope from above is more difficult, mostly because the crew has to suddenly slow the plane and descend rapidly to intercept the signal.
We also call this a slam dunk approach, and some pilots like it, some pilots don't. It's a little bit harder, and things happen quicker when you're above the glide path trying to intercept from above, and it's just a challenge for a lot of pilots.
The approach from above increased the crew's workload, but it's standard practice at Schiphol Airport.
I've flown into Schiphol dozens of times, and I expect it.
If the controller's instructions had somehow overtaxed this crew, their conversations would indicate it. They're just 5 kilometers from the runway.
1,000.
Check.
Flaps 40. Speed brake.
Speed brake armed. Green light.
One thing at a time. Landing gear.
Gear down. 3 green.
Flaps.
Flaps 40. Green light.
500.
All lights on.
Please warn the cabin crew.
Cabin crew, take your seats.
Then, real trouble. A stall warning.
Speed, sir.
I have control.
100 knots of speed.
Arasan fought to save his plane, but just 400 feet above the ground and only 1.5 kilometers from the runway, the Boeing 737 suddenly fell straight down. It only took a few seconds for it to hit the ground.
Turkish 1951,
The recording sheds light on the final minutes of the flight. The crew was configuring their plane for landing well after it should have been done.
Flaps.
Flaps 40, green light.
Most airlines have regulations that call for a flight to be stabilized, to have all checklists completed by the time the plane hits 1,000 feet.
In instrument conditions, you're required at 1,000 feet to have basically everything done. The airplane is configured, you have slowed, you have run your before landing check, and you have received your landing clearance. And from 1,000 feet on in, you just monitor the instruments, and we're looking for the runway.
Please warn the cabin crew.
Cabin crew.
In fact, this crew was still running their checklist up to the moment the crisis hit, 460 feet above the ground.
This approach was not stabilized.
Because the aircraft was unstable, the flight crew was in a very high workload environment in the last 1,000 feet of flight.
The radio altimeter was malfunctioning. The aircraft was giving off warnings. The crew was assigned a challenging approach, and they were executing a checklist late. But none of this explains why Flight 1951 crashed.
In these type of accidents, you can never get inside the head of the pilots. And that's a very frustrating type of accident.
But the flight data recorder does provide another intriguing clue. Moments before Flight 1951 hit the ground, the plane's engines were at idle, hardly providing any power. Perhaps this accident is a repeat of the Heathrow incident.
The engines, it was interesting to note, were at idle approximately the last 2 minutes of the flight, until the very end when the thrust was increased again. That was a big red flag right there. The question is why was that the case?
But then they spot something that's very different from the accident at Heathrow.
Tart flare mode.
For some reason, while still more than 1,000 feet above the ground, the plane's computer began preparing to touch down. In retard flare mode, engine power is reduced to idle by the flight computer, and the plane's nose automatically pitches up to the flare position. Planes should only be in this configuration just before they touch the ground.
The autopilot raises the nose to break the descent. The autothrottles brings the power back to flight idle, and you touch down with the power either all the way in idle or just about to be in idle.
But Flight 1951 went into a slow, nose-up position well before touchdown, causing the plane to fly slower and slower throughout its descent. So why was Flight 1951 in landing mode? And why hadn't any of the 3 crew members noticed how slowly they were flying?
So, what else was going on when the engines went to idle?
The trouble seems to start with the malfunctioning altimeter.
We had to look at the system as a whole and to see how that -8 affected the other systems on the aircraft. And that was a very big portion of this investigation. We had to say, how did the autopilot use that data? More importantly, how did the autothrottle use that data?
The computer that flies the plane consists of 2 main systems, the autopilot and the autothrottle. The autothrottle determines how much power to ask the engines for, while the autopilot controls the plane's altitude and direction. The 2 systems work independently of each other, and only one of the radio altimeters provides information to the autothrottle.
In this case, I had to learn everything there was about radio altimeters and autothrottle systems, which I didn't know before.
The pieces of the puzzle begin coming together when they find the connection between the faulty radio altimeter and engine power.
The radio altimeter provides information to the autothrottle from the captain's side.
The only altimeter feeding information to the autothrottle was the captain's, and it was wrong. It showed -8 feet throughout most of Flight 1951's approach. It's beginning to look like the faulty radio altimeter triggered the events that led to the crash. Investigators need to know what went wrong with it. On a 737, The transmitting and receiving antennas for both radio altimeters are lined up underneath the cockpit. 3 of the antennas were all but destroyed in the crash. They can't be tested. But 1 antenna from the captain's side is undamaged. Investigators consider 2 possibilities: a failure of one of the components, or some sort of interference that caused the faulty reading. The only component that survived the crash checks out. The computers that control the system also work. But investigators do make a curious discovery about them. They aren't the same ones that were installed on the plane when it was delivered to Turkish Airlines 7 years ago. This find changes the focus of the investigation.
The maintenance aspect of this accident aircraft was one that we looked at as deeply as we could.
When the plane's maintenance log is studied, investigators find that the radio altimeter on this plane had a problematic history.
We got additional data from Turkish Airlines, and that data showed that on this one aircraft, of the past, I believe, over 1,000 flights, there was about 150 flights that had faulty radio altimeter systems.
The documents show that a little more than a year before the crash, both computers were replaced because of complaints they were causing faulty readings. One of the incidents involved a radio altimeter reading of -8 feet.
So that was telling us that there was an issue that had been there. The issue did not just occur on this flight.
The faulty readings persisted. Mechanics repeatedly swapped the computers and replaced the antennas to try to solve the problem. It's determined that Turkish Airlines tried several ways to fix the altimeter, but they couldn't find a repair that worked. At the time of the accident, Turkish Airlines had a fleet of 52 Boeing 737-800 series airplanes.
It's on page 93.
When we reviewed the maintenance data, we found that radio altimeter problems had been written up several times on both the accident airplane and the fleet.
Investigators discover that in the year before the crash, Turkish Airlines dealt with 235 system faults with the radio altimeters on their 737s. Fixes ranged from replacing and exchanging antennas, cleaning of the systems, exchanging and replacing the computers, and installing gaskets to shield the system from possible water damage.
It's not like they weren't doing anything about it.
The Turkish Airlines maintenance personnel knew that the radio altimeter problem was one of their highest issues with regard to maintenance.
16 of those altimeter repairs were made to the plane that crashed in February 2009. If the problem was so widespread, investigators wonder why it hadn't caused serious problems before this accident. They don't have to dig too far back to find out that in fact it had, on this very same plane.
On 2 recent flights, they had the exact same problem.
Twice in the 48 hours leading up to the accident, the radio altimeter showed a negative reading, putting the plane into retard flare mode. Both times, the crew noticed the problem, disengaged the auto throttles, and brought the plane in for a safe landing.
You just disconnect it and fly the airplane.
In the months after the crash, other operators come forward with similar stories. In Australia, in the Netherlands, in Canada, in Austria, pilots report their 737s going into retard flare mode when the left radio altimeter showed a faulty reading. Each of those crews reacted the same way. They disengaged the auto throttle and pushed the power back up manually. They all landed safely.
Things are going to break on an airplane, and usually you're able to identify that and take that out of, make it so that it's not a threat for the landing.
In 2008, Boeing received a whopping 2,569 reports of faulty radio altimeters on their latest 737s. But very few of those cases involved the plane going into retard flare mode.
Hardly any reports at all.
Boeing also tried but couldn't find the cause of the failures. They concluded that the radio altimeter problem was not a threat to safety because the 737 gives off enough warnings so that crews can intervene and land safely. In fact, in every instance where the radio altimeter failed, crews were able to recover. Turkish Airlines Flight 1951 seems to be the one exception. Investigators still don't know why.
It really got us wondering of what happened. And that's when we started to look really closely at the actions of the flight crews while it was on that final approach in less than 1,000 feet.
Finally, as investigators again revisit the last minutes of Flight 1951, the circumstances of the tragedy become clear. They see a remarkable sequence of events that transpire to bring down this plane.
So, what was happening when the plane went into retard flare mode?
They discover that the plane went into landing mode and pulled back power at the worst possible moment, exactly as the crew was descending to meet the glide slope.
It masked what was actually happening.
As the crew configured their plane to drop down to meet the glide slope, they expected the plane to slow down as part of that maneuver. But the plane was actually slowing down because the computer was in landing mode. That's why none of the three pilots said anything about the throttles moving to idle.
It was insidious. Where it first captured in the retard mode, it didn't hurt them at all because they were actually high and they were a little bit fast. And the pilots actually wanted the power back anyway. In fact, the throttles may have already been in the flight idle mode as they were trying to get down and slow down.
Right, the trouble starts here at 8,300 feet, 13 miles out from the airport, minutes before the crash.
Amsterdam. Turkish 1951, descending 7,000, speed 250.
Turkish 1951, descend to 4,000. Speed okay for ILS 18, right.
Radio altimeter.
Would the crew have known that because of that radio altimeter, they would have gone to a retard flare mode in the throttles? No.
It was a common problem at the airline, but the crew couldn't see the risk it posed this flight.
We have an airplane that was malfunctioning in a very minor way, but in a way that, if not caught, could and did metastasize into something much more virulent.
Turkish 1951, descend to 2,000.
2,000, 1951.
Turkish 1951, left heading 210, cleared approach 18 right.
Left 210, clear ILS, Turkish 1951.
Now left at 210 degrees, maintaining 2,000 feet, brings the flight in right here, 5.5 miles out. They now have to intercept the glide slope from above.
At 2,000 feet, with the glide slope below them, the pilots have to reduce their speed while descending steeply.
Speed 140.
They believe the throttles are moving back for the descent to the glide slope. In fact, the auto throttle is slowing the plane down because it's gone into landing mode. It will continue to slow the plane until it stalls.
What we found is that when the flight crew was doing their before landing checklist, each one of them was doing something while they should have been monitoring their airspeed.
For the next 100 seconds, no one notices what's happening. Until it's too late.
Established altitude set.
1,000.
Check.
Flaps 40.
Speed set.
The experienced pilot recognized that the first officer was probably a little bit behind on the approach, so he calls for flaps 40 and moves the lever, informing the first officer that he has done so. He's trying to help the first officer catch up to the position of the aircraft.
Speed brake.
Speed brake armed. Green light.
One thing at a time. Landing gear.
The plane is now 700 feet from the ground.
Gear down. 3 green.
Flaps.
Flaps 40. Green light.
In their haste to complete their checklist, none of the 3 crew members notice the warnings that their speed is dropping dangerously. First, a red bar appeared on their flight display. Then, when the airspeed continued to drop, a flashing box appeared around their actual airspeed to draw the pilot's attention to it. At this point, no one sees either.
Cabin report confirmed.
The aircraft is now 600 feet from landing.
When things start changing colors, it's a warning to you, it's a caution to you that you're approaching the limits of the aircraft.
Missed approach. Altitude set.
500.
So all of these indications the crew has in front of them saying that the aircraft is slowing down. During that time, they were still completing their checklist.
Of course, the aircraft is getting closer to the ground.
In fact, it's less than 500 feet from touchdown.
And right before the stick shaker started, the captain told the safety pilot,
Please warn the cabin crew.
Cabin crew, take your seats. Speed, sir.
I have control.
By the time they advanced the throttles to full power, it was unrecoverable. They were too low for the engines to catch up.
And that's it. It's now too late to save this plane. They all knew about the altimeter problem, but knowing didn't help.
Boeing also didn't foresee the potentially deadly effect of a faulty altimeter. But on February the 25th, 2009, it triggered an unusual sequence of events that brought down a jetliner and killed 9 people. The official report into the accident blames it on a convergence of circumstances.
There is never, ever just one cause to an airline accident. It simply doesn't exist. Maybe someday God will swap one out of the sky, but until then, there's never one cause.
The Dutch report also points out that Boeing could have realized the problem with the radio altimeter system could have had an impact on safety. Given that no one foresaw how that failure might cause a crash, the Turkish Airlines accident raises a big question. Are airplanes becoming too complex? Investigators have determined that Turkish Airlines Flight 1951 crashed mainly because the pilots didn't recognize the consequences of the warnings they were getting.
Turkish 1951, descend to 4,000.
This is not the first plane to crash because the crew didn't understand what their plane was telling them.
Our problem is not the automation. Our problem is the depth of the training and the ability of the human beings to recover from mistakes made in interfacing with the automation.
Mika Ensley studies the relationship between pilots and technology.
We haven't really designed the automation to take best advantage of what people do well and take away the parts that people don't do well.
In 1996, the crew of an Aero Peru 757 crashed when the pilots couldn't decipher contradictory warnings about their altitude and airspeed. The plane flew into the Pacific Ocean. 61 passengers and 9 crew members were killed. In 1995, the flight management system on a Boeing 757 could and should have steered the plane to a safe landing in Cali, Colombia. But a last-minute change to the flight plan meant the crew had to reprogram their computer. They mistakenly entered a course that took them headlong into a 9,000-foot mountain. 159 people died in the crash.
The cautionary tale here is that we can get this equipment, we can get these silicon-based units, if you will, so sophisticated that we can't talk to them effectively. And when they go berserk, or they have a problem, or we misprogram them, we end up putting ourselves and our passengers in danger while we're trying to figure it out.
NASA is working on something called the Integrated Intelligent Flight Deck. It's a project aimed at helping humans better use the technology that surrounds them in the cockpit.
They're looking at automated flight manual systems, voice recognition systems. They've developed new kinds of microphones that are bone-conducting chips. They're developing new displays for understanding the ground environment, for being able to detect where other aircraft are in the environment.
What some researchers are finding is that the best technology shouldn't replace pilots, but work with them.
Really integrating people with technology more effectively has to do with designing the displays so that you can really understand what it's doing, and you can make it simpler to understand how to make it do what it is you want it to do. You shouldn't have to push 16 buttons through 8 levels of menus to figure out what's going on with the system. It should be integrated and presented effectively. It should be as easy to communicate with as the person next to you.
Boeing and Airbus, the two largest manufacturers of passenger planes, take very different approaches to the relationship between humans and technology. Airbus gives the flight computer much of the decision-making power in the cockpit.
In their view, this is a way to prevent a lot of human errors by making sure the airplane doesn't do something that's going to cause a crash, even if the humans want them to.
But Boeing has a different view. Its philosophy is to provide information to pilots and have them make decisions.
Having more information is better for the pilot than having the pilot in the loop, in the equation, so to speak. I kind of like that.
Airbus will argue vociferously and in continuous fashion that that view is archaic and incorrect. I think the jury is still out.
The final report into the Turkish Airlines tragedy blames the crash of Flight 1951 partly on a failure of technology.
The erroneous radio altimeter data caused the autothrottle to go to an improper mode that is, of course, not a good situation.
The cause of the radio altimeter failure was never uncovered. The Dutch investigation asks Boeing to improve the reliability of the system.
We learned a lot about the radio altimeter system and how it affects the autothrottle system. Boeing is currently working on system improvements to prevent this type of autothrottle event from occurring again.
But the report also faults the crew for not noticing that their airspeed was dropping dangerously low, in spite of the fact that there were 3 pilots on board.
Forget that you got an autothrottle. You look at the airspeed, and you look at the altitude. You look out the damn window if you want to, but airspeed is a crucial component of staying alive in an airplane. And you always need to know what your airspeed is.
But to Mika Ensley, the crew's failure to monitor instruments is entirely understandable and may be more the fault of the instruments than the crew.
It's actually very difficult for people to be monitors of automation. One of the things that people don't do a good job of actually is monitoring. We're very good on-the-spot decision makers. We're very good at coming up with creative solutions to problems, but repetitive monitoring is the kind of thing that actually people aren't very good at all. So what we have to do is design automation to work with people in a way that keeps them more actively, cognitively involved and in the loop, and not just monitoring a piece of automation to say, is it doing what it's supposed to be doing?
Who's the ultimate computer? The pilot, the individual who should be able to say, I don't know what this thing is doing to me, but I'm punching it off and flying the airplane. Fly the jet. Probably the smartest thing we ever learned to say in our training in the airlines, fly the jet. Do that first or nothing else counts. That's what they forgot to do.